Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Brooke Bordeaux had really enjoyed her day at the fair with her two best friends from her childhood, Fern and Anthea, who had persuaded her to come and join them on this fun day out. Brooke hadn't been to a fair in years, and was quite certain she was far too grown up to enjoy the childlike whimsical things that she had once loved as a little girl. But she was pleasantly surprised to find that going back in time and reliving childlike memories from the past was much more fun than she'd ever anticipated it would be. Indeed, for her, being at the fairground was rather like a flashback to a more innocent time in her life, so getting involved in all these childlike indulgences had been an absolute scream for her. She couldn't remember a time when she'd laughed as much as this, so much so that her belly actually ached, which is the kind of laughter that is reputed to having enormous health benefits. The three young women had ambitiously participated in everything that the fair had to offer. They'd enjoyed riding the carousel, guessing how many beans were in a glass jar, throwing sponges at each other's faces, when one of the three of them would stand behind the stand, placing their head through the open hole, which had been made to look like an old man. Probably because it made throwing the sponge at an old man seem very inappropriate, which made the game a whole lot more fun. Brooke's aims had been startlingly accurate, so much so that both her friends had been covered unapologetically with the horrifying impact of a very wet sponge thrown directly in their faces, which had ensured all three women were left in stitches. But unfortunately Brooke's two best friends were unable to return the favour and give Brooke a very good thump in the face in return with a wet sponge, for their ungainly, rather pathetic aims had been pitiful to say the very least. It got a whole lot worse with the pie-throwing stand, where they'd thrown pies into each other's faces, and had gone off to the ladies to clean up, for their clothes had been soaked with pie, and there wasn't an area on their faces that wasn't covered with the mucky goo. But this made them laugh all the more, for chasing each other around with pies had been absolutely hilarious. The three had enjoyed using those cardboard cut-out fish magnets to hopefully pull out a prize for themselves in a make-believe steel fish pond. But all three young women's attempt to fish for anything was futile to say the least, and had been lousy and unproductive, for they had ended up with no prizes at all, which was exceedingly frustrating, especially after seeing the smug lady before them, walking off rather self-satisfied, with a teddy bear that was almost bigger than she was. It didn't help that she was wearing a huge, conceited grin on her face, and looked at the three women rather pompously, as if she instinctively knew that they wouldn't be receiving any prizes that day, which made them all the more determined to try and try again, until their wallets were running empty. Irrespective of all their losses, it did little to deter the fun they were having at the fair that day. There were so many people everywhere, walking around the place, all with big smiles on their face. The prime objective of the fair was to raise some much-needed money for cancer research. Some women appeared to be wearing pink T-shirts for breast cancer awareness, and there was a large van parked at the corner of the fair where women could go for a quick screening. But Fern, Anthea and Brooke avoided that van like the plague, as it would have put a marked damper on their day, as no one wants to think about cancer on a fun day out like this. It was a bustle of lively activity. Little children were happily screaming in delight as they enjoyed all the rides on offer, of which there were too many to choose from. There were kids carrying Mickey Mouse balloons, and some had their faces painted in makeup to resemble a lion, a tiger, or even a bird. And Brooke remembered when she was a kid how after returning home from having her face made up into a cat, her mother had to chase her around the house to catch her, as Brick did not want that makeup to be removed, for she had fancied looking like a cat forever. But sadly reality had punched her cruelly in the face when her mother had wiped her face clean and told her she looked so much better without all that muck on her. "But I want to be a cat!" she had cried out indignantly, looking at her clean face with such bitter disappointment. Her mother had told her to stop being so ridiculous, because she wouldn't look very good if she went around looking like a cat all the time. But Brooke had disagreed with her on this. Brooke and her two best friends had eaten candy floss in a cloud of glorious colours, and gluttonously gobbled their way through sticky toffee apples and caramel popcorn that had done their teeth no favours. Brooke's teeth were now aching from all that chomping, and she had a horrible unsettling feeling in her gut that she might just have developed a cavity in one of her teeth. But then again, who cared about things like that when they were having an absolute blast from the past? Indeed, it didn't get better than this. It would seem all three young women had lost themselves in the day, forgetting that they were in their early 20s, for they had become kids again, almost as if they had been teleported on a magic carpet back to 20 years ago, returning and arriving at the destination of their childhoods. Brooke couldn't help thinking to herself how when she was a child she had longed to be all grown up like her mother, and yet the childhood years of her life had been so fleeting and among the best. So why would anyone in their right minds ever wish their childhoods away? It was at the fair that all three young women forgot their responsibilities. They became one with the moment, not thinking of the past nor of the future, which is exactly how children tend to approach life. And there is a lot to learn from such people, who know how to live in the moment, a second at a time. So to become a kid for a day was utterly wonderful. Brooke realized that even though she'd grown up, that there was still a big child within her that desperately wanted to come out and play and have a good time, and really appreciated letting go of adult responsibilities for a change, which was extremely liberating for her. Laughter gaily spilled out in the air that afternoon. Joyful voices impregnated the atmosphere with an upbeat, excitable energy that was contagiously infectious, for there was not a glum, sad face to be seen anywhere. And even the people running the stands, from the trombola to the man organising the pony rides, seemed to be enjoying themselves profusely. The order of the day was to have a great time. Brooke had only stumbled across one grumpy elderly man, complaining tirelessly about a gammy leg that was giving him a whole lot of pain. He kept saying, "Why did we come here? My leg is killing me. I want to get back home. I wish I hadn't come to the fair. Why did we come out?" But the three women ran into him half an hour later, and the man's dispirited face appeared almost childlike and enthusiastic, as if he had miraculously lost over 60 years of his life and had been transported back to his childhood again. And the smile on his face was so wide it barely fit on him. It would seem, out on the fair this morning, even the most miserable of people were being completely transformed, as if their childhoods had come bouncing back in a flash of lightning, it would seem. "I can't remember the last time I had so much fun," Brooke conceded to both of her friends. "I'm just like that grumpy old man we ran into. I thought I'd have a miserable time here, but I genuinely can't recall a time when I've laughed so much. I've been in stitches all morning. I wanted to kill you, Fern, I really did, for throwing that custard pie square in my face. It was dribbling down my cheeks and saturating my clothes and was sticking to me. But in the end it was so hilarious to be covered in muck like that. But the most satisfying feeling of all, of course, was to get my revenge on you, which I did very well, I might add, throwing a pie straight back at you. I feel like a kid again, and it's so great. It's so carefree, so relaxed and chilled to feel like this. These days I get so uptight, so tense. But this afternoon, it's almost as if a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I would certainly recommend any adult come to the fair like this. They'd never regret it. I wish I could push my mum to come here. My mum is 1,000 times worse than I am. You know what she's like. She's pent up about everything. She could do with coming to the fair. But she thinks it's just pathetic to come to the fair at our age. But it's not. It's a wonderful thing to do. Fern gave her a cheeky nudge and giggled. Didn't I tell you this is exactly what we all needed? A chance to pretend we're children again. I'm not going to lie. I adored throwing that custard pie directly in your face, Brooke. You're right. These days you are uptight. You needed some loosening up. You should have seen your reaction, though. You were mortified when the pie I threw at you hit your face. You got mad at me. You began to chase me with the pie. We both ended up rolling on the ground. We were cramped up with laughter. If the truth be told, I haven't laughed this much in an age. It does feel like old times, doesn't it? I mean, we used to do these kind of things together as children, and now all we do is sit down in a bar and enjoy a glass of wine together. How boring is that? Brooke nodded. You're right, it does get boring sometimes, the things that adults do. Drinking a glass of wine is overrated, let me tell you. Being here reminds me of the time I threw that squidgy cake at you in 3rd grade. We chased each other around the schoolyard, throwing anything we could find at each other. Sandwiches and drink, you name it. I wouldn't have missed this for the world, even though that custard pie really did rile me up a bit. But that's the whole idea, Brooke, to rile each other up. It stirs up that childlike passion that so often gets suppressed when we grow up. Brooke was a 1st grade teacher who taught children to read and write. Even though she surrounded herself with that childlike innocence of young children from Monday to Fridays, she could be rigidly stiff and extremely set in her ways. She had an unfortunate propensity to take life far too seriously, much like her parents did. Maybe it ran in the Bordeaux genes, to always look at life so very seriously, almost as if it was an exam you needed to study for, and getting less than A++ wasn't even a consideration. It was like Brooke wore the weight of the world on her shoulders every single day of her life, but a trip to the fair had revealed to her very candidly that sometimes it's really good to let your hair down for a change and go with the flow, and being able to laugh like this was medicine for the soul. Brooke's father was one of those very, very stern individuals who could listen to a comedy on television and fail to find anything remotely amusing. He was the kind of pessimistic individual that always looked utterly miserable and believed that life was one big laborious challenge after another, and his bleak, rather morbid outlook on things certainly rubbed off on Brooke, who growing up had wanted to be nothing like her father, but had realized in recent years to her horror that she'd become exactly like him, but the female version of him, so to speak. Even to look at, they appeared uncannily similar, with the same colour brown hair, which was pretty drab, but they both had natural chestnut highlights and hazel-coloured eyes. Brooke's mother kept telling her daughter that she was exactly like her father, and that bugged her greatly, because she knew she'd inherited his very sombre boot face, which was not something Brooke wanted to hear. But when she examined herself in the mirror, she could see her father staring straight back at her, and indeed, when she smiled, her lips seemed to go downwards in exactly the same way as her father's did. It meant that Brooke always looked miserable, even when she was happy, which was a rather unfortunate trait to inherit from her father, as it would seem even when she was having a great time, it never really showed on her face. She hated this about herself, as so often growing up people would say to her, "Cheer up, Brooke, it might never happen." And their stinging words weren't exactly encouraging, because she could do nothing to change her appearance, apart from engaging in some serious cosmetic procedure, which was something she'd never be inclined to do. And who had heard of a surgeon turning your lip upwards so that you smile differently? So Brooke was resigned to the fact that there were some things she'd never be able to change about herself. To be fair, Brooke's mother, Samantha, was not much better by any manner of means, when it came to being instinctively miserable by nature. If she thought Brooke and her husband Jonas both possessed a rather unfortunate boot face, she should have taken a long, hard look at her reflection in the mirror, because she wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine herself. Her troubled, disquieted dark eyes were a tad fearful, and her uneasy lips, although they didn't drag downwards into a scowl like her daughter's and husband's did, were almost always nervously pinched together, as if she believed she was living her precarious life on the edge of a cliff and might just fall over any minute. Brooke's mother was extremely paranoid and overly suspicious. She was always advising Brooke to be extremely careful, as accidents could easily happen, especially if you crossed the road without paying attention, or rushed down the stairs of the wraparound porch in winter when they were iced up, for you might be disposed to having a nasty fall or break a wrist or an ankle. When Brooke had fallen ill, her mother would believe Brooke had pneumonia and was about to pop her clogs in any minute, when all she'd had was a mild case of flu. And even when the doctors reassured her that Brooke would live to fight another day, Samantha Bordeaux was not entirely convinced her daughter would ever make a full recovery. She was the kind of keyed-up, overwrought woman that would read the medical encyclopedia from back to front and over-embellish everything, insisting that any mild symptoms that anyone in the Bordeaux family had were a deadly strain of cancer or some other far-fetched disease. Brooke's contrived mother seemed to be terrified of accidents, and as a consequence she would drive her Volkswagen Golf at an extremely low speed, and was always getting angry drivers giving her the finger. She was so vigilantly cautious with whatever she did, always heedfully carrying mace on her person to protect herself from dangerous threats that she was sure lurked around the very next corner. Samantha Bordeaux circumspectly believed you could never be careful enough, and if you weren't paying attention, that is exactly when disaster would invariably strike. Brooke would tease her mother mercilessly about her paranoia, and say, "Ma'am, if you were a mouse, even the trappers that came along to set up traps would never fool you. You'd be too wary to go anywhere near that cheese, because you'd smell a rat," she joked. "Well, it doesn't do any harm to be mindfully cautious," said Mrs. Bordeaux. "And you're right about the mouse trap. I would be a very salient mouse. They'd never catch me, those trappers, because I'd be far too clever for them, and I'd live a long life as a consequence. A fool rushes into things without paying due attention. I mean, look at those maniac drivers who drive through the red lights to get ahead on the road. You wonder what is going on in their heads, why they have no common sense, why they appear to be so dreadfully ignorant. Some of these people, oh, God bless their souls, never reach their destinations, do they? Because of their over-ambitiousness to get to their destination in the first place. And what happens? They end up pushing the daisies, just because they wanted to get somewhere a little faster." Brooke still lived at her parents' house, which of course was a tad embarrassing for a woman approaching her mid-20s, but her pitiful teacher's salary didn't exactly pay out very much. She was glad that many young people were in her rather awkward position, who also lived with their parents, so she didn't feel an absolute failure in that regard, that she wasn't living independently, although she very much wished she was. Ostensibly affording a house with the rising cost of living was completely out of the question for her. Brooke knew her parents liked her living with them, for the Bordeaux could keep a beady eye on their daughter's comings and goings, for the couple intrinsically believed the world was not a safe place to live in any more. So watching over their daughter gave them a measure of reassurance. The Bordeaux seemed to enjoy living under a dark cloud, almost as if they were expecting lightning to strike at any given moment, as Mrs. Bordeaux couldn't help flapping around the place like an agitated pigeon, for it seemed to Samantha Bordeaux that it was in her DNA to worry about absolutely everything. Brooke had always longed to be a first-grade teacher. It was all she ever wanted to do, and so she loved her job at the elementary school. But teaching youngsters to read and write was not an easy endeavour by any manner of means, and sometimes she'd have sleepless nights about those kids that were struggling to learn, because it was very important to Brooke to be the best teacher she could possibly be in the circumstances. Of course, going out to the fair today had actually not gone down well with her cynical parents, who seemed to think that going to the fair was not something a grown-up person should be doing. "Good Lord, Brooke, you do surprise me. You're making a day out of this, are you? Going to the fair at your age? I might remind you, you're in your 20s. You're far too old for such a juvenile thing to do. If you were taking children in the first grade to the fair, supervising them, I could understand that. That's why parents go to the fair, to be with their children. But going to the fair with your two adult friends when you're in your 20s does seem rather juvenile, if you ask me." "Nobody's asking you anything, Mum, and I'd thank you to keep your opinion to yourself. If you must know, the fair is being held to raise money for cancer research. A lot of adults go to the fair. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think it's great to support the fair. Fern and Anthea persuaded me to go along with them, and believe it or not, it actually might be fun." "I very much doubt that, dear. It's a very childish thing to do if you want my opinion on the matter." "Well, I don't, Mum." Mrs. Bordeaux sceptically raised her manicured brow in a disapproving expression. "If you had a child of your own, Brooke, it would be a different story altogether. I remember on numerous occasions taking you to the fair when you were a child. I never enjoyed the experience myself, but that's what you do when you're a mother. You would always return home with sticky fingers, toffee apple stains around your mouth, and a blue tongue from all the blueberry ice cream you ingested. And you would always insist every single time that we went near those face painters to have your face painted into a cat. And you'd refuse to let me remove the makeup from your face. I'd have to hunt you down to get it off. You would make one hell of a fuss, let me tell you." "But I loved having my face painted up into a cat, and you were so cruel the way you made me take it off the moment I got home. You should have let me enjoy being a cat for a bit longer." "I don't think that would have been a good idea, Brooke. Imagine how much damage it would have done to your skin. But as far as I'm concerned, you're a grown woman. Taking a ride on a carousel and chomping through clouds of candy floss at your age is over the top, if you ask me." "Nobody ever asked you for your opinion, Mum, so I'll thank you to keep it to yourself if you don't mind. We're just going to have a bit of harmless fun, and it's to support cancer research. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing is ever harmless fun, Brooke. I wish you would realise that. I need to warn you. You need to be careful today. There are bound to be some dodgy people at the fair floating around." "What are you talking about, Mum?" Samantha Bordeaux's fraught lips became unduly pinched. Her eyes widened with an earnestness that Brooke was well acquainted with. She drew in a deep breath and braced herself, as she waited for her mother to tell her about the imminent dangers that awaited her at the fair. Brooke was well used to her mother's long drawn-out deliveries of what to watch out for. Indeed, if her mother was a weather reporter, there'd be no sunny days ever left. "These days the world isn't a safe place, love. I wish you would realise that," her mother predictably said. "In the good old days, when I was young, things were markedly different to what they are now. I could freely ride my bicycle down the street with the neighbours' kids, and not worry about a pervert hiding out in his car getting ready to kidnap one of us. My mother wouldn't worry about me because it was safe out there. Crime was at an all-time low, but not any more, I'm afraid. There might be pickpocketers at the fair.
Such people are opportunists who will take full advantage of a purse that isn't being fiercely guarded. So you must have your wits about you at all times, Brooke."
"Oh, Mum, change the record, won't you? You go on and on about how I've got to be careful about this, how I've got to be careful about that. Honestly, you worry so much. Relax, everything's going to be fine. And I am careful, I'll have you know. I mean, I've been brought up by you. So being cautious, well, that goes with the territory of being your daughter. Your influences have actually rubbed off on me, believe it or not."
"That's the trouble, Brooke. I don't think my influences have rubbed off on you at all. You are so carefree, and that's your problem. Me and your father worry about you incessantly. You are a lot less responsible than you should be, Brooke. And much as I like your best friends, Fern and Anthea, very much, I'm very sorry to say that those young ladies aren't exactly the most responsible young women I've ever seen. Nor are they the best influence on you. Don't get me wrong. They're lovely people, but they're far too carefree and nonchalant about everything, in my opinion. They both act as if life is an ongoing bowl of cherries, and nothing is ever going to go pear-shaped for them. When I think they're in for a rude awakening, because I'm quite sure trouble is waiting for them around the very next corner. But they fail to see it. They're completely oblivious about how the world works, and how cruel and cold it can actually be. And as a consequence, I think their haphazard, lackadaisical attitudes have rubbed off on you somewhat, and not made you prudent enough. For a start, I think your driving leaves a lot to be desired, Brooke. It scares me out of my wits to see how completely irresponsible you are behind the wheel. You put your foot on that pedal far too hard, love, and it really concerns me. Even your father thinks your driving is a bit on the dodgy side. And if you carry on driving this way without due caution, sooner or later you're going to end up in an accident."
"Oh, Mum! Oh, there you go again. How many times have you told me this? Don't be so ridiculous." Brooke rolled her eyes in exasperation. "We can't all drive as slowly as you, Mum, or we take forever to get to our destination."
"What are you implying, Brooke?" said Samantha Bordeaux indignantly. "Are you suggesting that I drive like a snail? I drive responsibly. That's the difference between me and you."
"You said it, Mum, not me."
"I'm a cautious driver, Brooke. I know, unlike you, that a vehicle is a deadly weapon, and when you drive irresponsibly, you can easily kill someone, or even yourself. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that. For the people in your generation are blindly ignorant, mistakenly believing that they will live forever. And many people get killed on the road as a consequence. Why? Because they were distracted by their cell phone or something, and didn't realize that they drove straight through a red light into oncoming traffic. That's the difference between me and you, Brooke. I also believe Fern and Anthea are not good drivers. They're almost as bad as you are, but not quite."
"Don't be so mean about my friends, Mum."
"I'm not being mean, love. I'm telling you the absolute truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat things because they're your friends. I'm going to say it exactly how it is, whether you like it or not. Sometimes it's good to hear the truth. Your father saw Fern driving one day on the road, and he was absolutely appalled by how many times she just overtook people so brazenly when she shouldn't have done so. She took so many unnecessary risks, and she drove erratically. That is asking for trouble. Do you realize how many people take unnecessary risks out there on the road, overtaking when they shouldn't, just like Fern does? And many of them never reach their destination, simply because they weren't cautious enough."
"And your point is, Mum?" said Brooke, raising a brow. She absolutely abhorred the way her mother rambled on and on about the dreadful things that could potentially happen to people who failed to pay attention. She was half tempted to say, "Change the record again, Mum, because you keep playing the same old miserable, joyless tune." But she wisely kept her lips shut.
"I've been thinking about it long and hard, Brooke. And you know what? I've come to the conclusion that you should take one of those advanced driving courses to improve your driving skills. It certainly wouldn't hurt to be more nimble behind the wheel. So your reaction time behind the driver's seat could potentially save you from a life-threatening, very dangerous situation.
I don't want to take an advanced driving course, Mum. I'm a perfectly good driver. I don't drive at your speed because I drive at the speed limit. But I'm a safe driver. I'm not a dangerous driver, and I resent the implications.
Well, think about it long and hard, Brooke. I will pay for your advanced driving lessons. Look on it as a gift from me. And if you think I'm coming down hard on you, it's only because I love you. So for goodness sake, don't take offence.
None taken, Mum, said Brooke, rolling her eyes. Brooke was glad to leave behind her nagging mother, and she arrived at the fair promptly with her two best friends from her childhood, Fern and Anthea. It would seem the loathsome weight of her parents' perennial pessimism lifted off her like a hot air balloon in the wind and floated away to be remembered no more. Her mother's warning words about keeping tabs on her purse at all times and watching out for opportunists were lost in the distraction of all the exciting activities on offer. Brooke was beginning to feel like a kid in a candy shop. She was glad she had come to the fair. It was refreshing not to take life too seriously for once. It was a vibrantly beautiful, beautiful day. The sky was the most perfect cup of blue you've ever seen, while the sun had magnanimously chosen to serenade the day with its generous warmth that was neither too hot nor too cold, so the weather could not have been more idyllic. It was early spring. The cold winter days that had dragged on and on like a long-winded school term that seems to never come to an end were finally behind them. Cheerful yellow daffodils flamboyantly announced the season's prompt arrival, and were happily clustered together in cheery groups, their dainty yellow heads bobbing gracefully in a gentle breeze that did little to diminish the warmth of this gorgeous day. Ostensibly, people had shed their outer clothing, rather like a snake lets go of its tight skin after a burst of growth. The crowd were wearing T-shirts and shorts and baring their white arms in the sun. It was just so lovely on the school playground, where the fair was being hosted. It was so warmly welcoming and inviting, and some of the saucer magnolia trees were bursting with bloom. Brooke was sure that right now she couldn't be in a better place, although doubtlessly her parents would beg to disagree, for they both thought that all childish things should be put behind you, now that you were grown up. But they were wrong about that, as far as Brooke was concerned, because it really was good to let go of your inhibitions. Her mother was a fine example of someone who held on to worry, like a tight overcoat that she refused to shed. But Brooke couldn't help feeling that if her mother were at the fair today, she might actually enjoy herself, if she gave herself half a chance, that is. Fern was the first to notice the large sign outside a red and white striped tent, which read, "Carella Dupreen, world-class gypsy fortune-teller. She can predict your future. We dare you to come in and have your fortune read, if you've got the courage." The latter part of the sign almost seemed like a challenge that Fern and Anthea were eager to take on, but Brooke was not so on board with this idea. One very large woman waddled past the three young ladies, with her equally as chubby 5-year-old daughter, who bore an uncanny resemblance to her, and was tightly clutching her hand. The woman joined the queue to the gypsy tent very eagerly, and cheekily pushed past a couple of people in the line, who gave her glaring looks, but politely said nothing. It would seem the buxom woman pretended she hadn't seen them, and Brooke overheard her saying to another lady, who she seemed to know, who was also standing in the queue, and allowed the buxom woman to slip in front of her. "I knew I would find you here, Gloria," said the over-large woman, in a voice that was bigger than she was, for everybody could hear her, as if she was announcing something on the loudspeaker. "I couldn't believe it when I saw the sign," she said excitedly. The layers of blubber under her chin wobbled as she jiggled with enthusiasm. "Carella Dupreen! She was in Las Vegas, you know, about 10 years ago. Crowds of people were queuing to see her. It was impossible. I didn't even think I'd get a chance to see her. The lions were so big.
She's the real deal, you know, the real deal. Her predictions are uncannily accurate. She told me my fortune. Everything she said to me came true. She told me I would marry a man in the building business, in building construction. She saw lots of houses, bricks and mortar. And guess what? I married a building contractor about a year after her reading. I can't believe she's here today. I can't wait to have another reading with her. She can take one look at your palm and knows things about you she can't possibly know. She is incredible. Other people, hearing the large woman's loud confirmations that the gypsy giving readings was legitimate, hurriedly began to scramble in line, so that it began to get longer and longer. Their expressions registered excitement, for if this gypsy was a real deal, they certainly wanted their fortunes told, while others looked hesitantly reluctant and a little on edge, as if they had reservations and extreme misgivings about having their fortunes read, because just supposing what Corella had to tell them was contrary to what they were hoping to hear. "Did you hear what that woman said?" said Fern, looking excitedly from Anthea to Brooke. "She said that she's heard of Corella Dupreen before. It sounds like the woman is the real deal. She's authentic. The woman claimed to have seen her in Las Vegas over 10 years ago. She claimed everything that Corella Dupreen told her came true. That is so cool, don't you think? And this gypsy is at the fair today, telling people their fortunes. Oh, I can't believe it. I've always wanted my fortune read. I must admit I thought at the fair we would have a make-believe fortune teller, telling us our fortunes just as a joke. But it sounds as if she's legitimate, that she's a real deal. She reads fortunes for a living. She's not charging much for a reading. I've never been to a real fortune teller before, so there's no time like the present. We've got to go and see her." Fern was so excited, her entire body shook like the branches of a tree, blown in a light breeze. "Imagine if this woman tells me I'm going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger who's going to whisk me off into the sunset," she giggled. "That would be so amazing, so amazing. I've had so little luck with men over the last couple of years. But maybe this Corella Dupreen will give me some hope for my beleaguered future. Reassure me kindly that I'm not going to be miserably single for the rest of my entire life. Believe me, sometimes I wonder if my lot in life is to be a lonely old cat lady, looking after hundreds of cats, and smelling like one too. As the way things are heading, that's the way my life is going, let me tell you. And I'm not exaggerating." "Oh, please, Fern, you are exaggerating, and you know it. You being a lonely old cat lady with hundreds of cats to look after? I don't think so. That would never, ever happen to you," said Anthea, shaking her head. "But that could be my story, and I admit it. If my pathetic dating life is anything to go by, that is. The last man I dated took me to an extravagant restaurant, and I thought I was in seventh heaven. I really did. And then, when it came to paying, he discovered he'd left his wallet behind. So I paid for absolutely everything, and it cost an absolute fortune. That meal practically crippled me. He assured me he would reimburse me, but I never heard a dicky bird from him again. It was so typical. My bet is he goes on dates with women all over the country and gets free meals everywhere he goes." "Well, I admit you've had some bad luck with men," Fern agreed. "But maybe the gypsy fortune teller will change all that. Maybe she'll tell us there's a gorgeous man waiting for us in the wings." "I hope you're right," said Anthea, "but I wouldn't be too confident about that." It was Brooke who was shaking her head madly, as she stared at the lengthening queue of people that was now standing outside the gypsy's tent. She shuddered. "There's no way I'm going in there. No way." "Why the hell not, Brooke?" asked Fern, looking exasperated. She could see by the disquieted expression on Brooke's face that she didn't like the idea of participating in this fun experience, and there were times that Brooke was predisposed to being a wet blanket. "I just don't want to go in there," said Brooke, her voice dropping to a muted whisper. "If we don't hear what we want to hear, what about that? Have you thought about that for a second? Imagine if this Corella Dupreen says that one of us is going to have a car crash or die of a deadly disease. Do you really want to know about that?"
Brooke instinctively regretted the words that had rolled off her tongue so freely, for she realized she sounded as neurotic as her mother. But she couldn't help the way she was feeling. Luckily for Brooke, her two best friends were used to her being downbeat about so many things, and always having such a bleak outlook. They believed they'd probably be much the same way, as Brooke was in temperament, if the Bordeaux happened to be their parents. For privately they had confided together that they had never met two more depressed people as Jonas and Samantha Bordeaux, who looked as if they were permanently carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Even their own parents were very reluctant to invite the Bordeaux over for a dinner or a family event, as Samantha Bordeaux would go on and on about deadly diseases that you could easily contract, and all kinds of horrific things you don't want to discuss over the dinner table when you happen to be entertaining your friends. They were the kind of people who seemed to worry about everything and nothing. Fern remembered a time very explicitly when she'd caught a very mild cold, and Mrs. Bordeaux had overreacted and told her she was certain she had pneumonia.
"You don't look good, Fern, dear,"
Mrs. Bordeaux had said very gravely, insisting on taking Fern's temperature and phoning her parents to tell them that their daughter was in a grave condition and they needed to take her to hospital at once. Fern's parents had almost had a heart attack, but when they picked up their daughter from the Bordeaux household, they realized that her cold was just a common cold and that there was nothing serious about her condition. So Mrs. Bordeaux was far too dramatic about so many things, and people were used to the Bordeaux being like that. Fern shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. "Honestly, Brooke, you do get your knickers in a twist, don't you? You're just like your parents. You worry too much about everything. Honestly, believe it or not, I do think the future for us all is bright. Besides all that, I'm certain there's a code of ethics that the gypsy abides by. Because if there wasn't, she wouldn't exactly make a lot of money, and people wouldn't want to go back to her. People don't exactly go and visit a fortune teller to be told that in the morning they're going to be run over by a bus. The gypsy knows that. She's not a complete idiot, you know. If she believed you were going to leave her tent after the fortune-telling and drop down dead, she'd hardly tell you that that was going to happen, even if she knew it. There's some things you just don't do." "Don't joke about such things, Fern," said Brooke, her face darkening. "You could be tempting fate. Do you know how dangerous it is to tempt fate? My mother told me once about this guy. He was in a bad state financially. He phoned up his insurance company and decided to stop paying his life insurance just for a couple of months. Then he was going to resume payment when he got a bit richer. The next day he dropped down dead. His poor family was left with nothing. That's what tempting fate does. You should never tempt fate and say that this is not going to happen and that is not going to happen, because when you say that, the very thing you believed won't happen does happen. It's like an albatross around your neck. And I'm not joking about it either." "Oh, come on, Brooke. Lighten up, will you?" said Anthea, interceding. "I think it would be cool to go and see the gypsy fortune teller. It's probably all nonsense anyway, but that's all part of the fun, isn't it? That's why we came to the fair today, to enjoy ourselves, to let our hair done, to be children again. We've tried everything today that's on offer. Although there's no way on God's earth I would go for a breast screening. But seeing a fortune teller, I think that's going to be cool. We don't have to believe a word of what she says, but it'll be a good experience, don't you think?" "I don't think it's going to be cool. I think it's a horrible thing to do. I don't want my fortune read. It feels wrong. None of us should know the future." Anthea grimaced. "Brooke, listen to yourself. You take life so very seriously. It's just a bit of fun. Lighten up, will you? I blame your parents for this. Your mother always believes the worst is going to happen. Come on, let's do it. Let's boldly take the plunge. You only live once, you know." Brooke looked at the sign above the tent and finally shrugged her shoulders in resignation. A nasty chill ran down her spine, as if a silent voice was discouraging her to go into that red and white tent to have her fortune told.
She didn't believe in these things anyway. Anthea was absolutely right. It was only a bit of harmless fun, wasn't it? So why was she so creeped out about the thought of going to have her fortune told by someone who claimed to be a real gypsy? For it scared her half to death. But both of her friends were mindlessly nonchalant about the whole thing. How she envied them for being so easygoing, so carefree, so insouciantly relaxed about their lives, never concerning themselves with deadly diseases or about crossing the road when the red light was flashing. Her friends took precarious risks and never came to any harm. But Brooke was always worried about what each day would hold, like her mother was. And she knew Althea was right. Her mother's morbidly dark influences over her life had stunted her hopes with so many doubts. Why couldn't she be more like her friends and take each day in its stride? Oh, come on, Brooke. I know you don't want to do this, but why don't you, for once in your life, live on the edge, take a risk, do something you wouldn't normally do? Said Anthea excitedly. She dragged Brooke into the line. Why do you look so serious, Brooke? You look so downcast. It's only a bit of fun. We're not going off to the execution chamber to have our heads chopped off, are we? If it makes you feel any better, I bet this woman isn't a real gypsy anyway. But even if she is the real deal, why are you freaked out about the thought of having your fortune read? I don't like the thought of someone telling me my future. It's creepy. Don't you think it's creepy? No, it's not creepy, said Fern, pulling a face. She looked at Brooke dubiously, shaking her head to express her disappointment in her friend. She hated the fact that Brooke could never chill out. She was always nervously looking over her shoulder, almost as if she was half expecting something terrible to happen to her. Even before they'd got to the fair, she had warned Fern and Anthea to watch their purses at all times, for there might be some dodgy characters lurking around the fairground. Fern wondered how anyone could live on their nerves like Brooke so obviously did. If she wasn't careful, she'd end up developing a panic disorder. You know what, Brooke? You're such a good friend of ours, and we love you to death. But you worry about so many things. You take life so seriously. Why do you think we came to the fair today? To lighten up, to have a good time. Not to think about all the depressing things you so often bring up with us. I want us to enjoy ourselves, to have some fun. We can't possibly leave this fair without having our fortunes read. But if you don't want to have yours read, fair enough. No one is forcing you to do anything you don't want to do. Brooke smiled. You know what? You're right. I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to have my fortune read. I'm sounding so pessimistic. I'm just like my mother. And if I carry on this way, I'm going to become her. And I don't want that to happen. I guess I needed a push in the deep end. So yes, I will do it. I'll have my fortune read. Good on you, girl. That's the spirit, said Fern, thumping Brooke on the back. If you carry on being this bold, you'll never end up being like your mother. Brooke smiled. She loved being around Fern and Anthea, and their fun-loving natures certainly helped her calm down significantly. Of course, her friends were absolutely right. It was only a bit of fun, and she'd really be a spoilsport if she didn't go along with this, as she wanted to be involved in everything they did today at the fair. And maybe if she didn't have her fortune read, she would be missing out on a whole lot. But I'd like to go first, if you don't mind, she said assertively, because she really wanted to get her session with the gypsy over and done with, so that she didn't have to stand there getting more and more flustered about the whole thing, as she continued to worry about what the gypsy was to tell her. It would be better to just take the bull by the horns right now, and dive straight into the deep end and be done with it. The tent was extremely dark and poky when Brooke pulled back the zip and entered the tent. She almost wanted to retreat from whence she'd come, but she managed to compose herself and steady her nerves. She heard a woman's voice saying, "Come in." A woman with hunched shoulders who was wearing a dark crochet shawl over her long wispy grey hair lifted a bony hand and waved it in the air, beckoning for Brooke to take a seat. Brooke was trembling. Her nerves jangled inside her, almost as if she was shaking her car keys very vigorously. Brooke sat down on the uncomfortable steel chair, which dug into her backside.
A pair of dark hooded eyes were fixed on her, and they made her feel extremely awkward and conspicuous. The gypsy was elderly. She was very badly weathered by the sun. Her face was a road map of deeply entrenched wrinkles, which made her head look like a wizened, shriveled-up tortoise, so much so that her eyes seemed almost too big for her crinkled face. There was a crystal ball on the dark tablecloth, which might have been for show, for the women never used it at all. Brooke wasn't good at guessing ages, but this elderly woman could have been in her late 80s or even early 90s. She looked a little stooped over, as if her back was slightly hunched. Her shoulders were narrow, and Brooke was certain that if the gypsy was to stand up, she might be under 5 foot tall, for she appeared to be rather petite. The woman stretched out a bony cold hand that looked like a gnarled claw, as her hand was riddled with arthritis. There was some dirt wedged under the woman's chewed-up fingernails, which was a little off-putting. It smelt rather musty and damp in the tent, almost as if there was mildew somewhere, which wasn't desperately pleasant. "Please, can I look at your bum?" said the woman in clipped English. Her accent was very pronounced, but Brooke had no clue where the woman originated from, but she was definitely not American-born and bred for sure. Brooke had been clenching her hands together so tightly that they had sweated profusely. Reluctantly, she presented her open palm to the old woman. The gypsy wiped away the perspiration from her palm with a tissue, which she rolled up into a ball and tossed into a nearby wastepaper basket, where there were dozens of other rolled-up pieces of tissue, which made Brooke wonder if the gypsy had been wiping dozens of sweaty palms this morning, of which hers was probably the very worst. Maybe other people were also secretly apprehensive about having their fortunes read, but they probably hid it well, unlike Brooke. The gypsy shook her head. "You trembling! You not want me to read your palm?" she said, peering at Brooke curiously, with a kind of frustrated expression, which actually suggested she was really saying, "Why are you here if you don't want me to read your fortune?" For she looked to be slightly impatient, as if she was used to time-wasters like Brooke, that she didn't appreciate, and had seen enough of them in her time. Brooke managed a watery smile. "But of course I want you to read my palm," she said, extending her palm out generously. "It's just, you know, I'm not used to this kind of thing," she tried to explain. "I've never had my palm read before." The gypsy said nothing to this, but her bony hand gripped Brooke's very tightly, spreading it out before her like a map that she wanted to read. Her eyes fixed on the lines on Brooke's palm. Brooke was really scared when the woman read it, for her eyes widened at one point as she was doing the reading, and Brooke was absolutely certain the woman had foreseen something very, very bad in her future. She felt as if her privacy had been cruelly invaded, and that any secret she might have been nursing had been laid barren. It made her feel all the more vulnerable and self-conscious, for she did not know what the gypsy had discerned about her, and there was a part of her that genuinely did not want to know. "You need to be still," said the voice firmly, as Fern hadn't realized how much her hand was continuing to shake. "I can't read it. Your hand, if you shake so much." "Oh, I'm so sorry," said Brooke nervously. "I've never done this before, you see," she explained yet again. The dark eyes gave nothing away as they continued to study Brooke's palm. Brooke took in a deep breath to ease her rising level of trepidation. She was absolutely terrified of what the gypsy might tell her. Supposing the gypsy was to tell her she had 6 months left to live, or she'd developed motor neuron disease when she reached her 30s, or the man she could potentially marry one day was secretly a bigamist who had 3 other wives she knew nothing about. Or maybe one day she'd have her teeth knocked out in a dreadful accident when she fell on the ice. Or perhaps she'd become an unfortunate victim in a house invasion. All these wild, irrational scenarios began to play out in her head, like the script in a movie. She began to shake all the more. The gypsy's ice-cold, claw-like hand, mottled with age spots, tried to anchor her firmly in place so that she didn't shift in her seat so erratically. "You are a teacher, I see," said the gypsy. "You teach young children. You are good at your job.
It's what you are meant to do. It's what you call it. It's your vocation. You teach young children. Yes, very young children.
Brooke's jaw dropped wide open.
Yes, that's right. I'm a teacher. I teach children, young children, between the ages of 6 and 7, to read and write.
Brooke was stunned and impressed that the gypsy appeared to know this. The gypsy nodded, as if she didn't need Brooke to tell her this, for she knew the information already. She looked at Brooke's palm a little harder. Then she shut her eyes tightly. When she opened them again, her eyes became a cloudy, rather milky colour, which was the scariest, most creepy thing Brooke had ever seen before in her life. The gypsy's eyes rolled back in her sockets for a moment, and she suddenly said,
I see. Something very bad, very, very bad, on your palm.
Oh, no, you don't, do you? Asked Brooke. She felt as if her lungs were beginning to collapse in her chest, rather like a deflated beach ball. All this talk about gypsies never breaking their code of ethics was completely wrong. She had known instinctively that the gypsy would tell her something dreadful, something she didn't want to hear. She had trusted Fern in believing this whole reading would be nonchalant and relaxed, but now she was feeling her entire body tightening.
You see something bad happening. What is it? She asked. I see you not paying attention. I see you driving under the influence. There is an accident, a road, a man. You must be careful, very careful. I see danger. I see potential death. You must be careful, for if this man dies, your future will not go as it is ordained. You must not mess up. You need to be cautious. You need to take the right path. You must not take the wrong one. And it will be easy for you to take the wrong one if you are not paying attention.
Am I going to die? Asked Brooke, snatching away her hand very quickly from the gypsy, her hazel eyes fixing with terror on the woman.
I'm not going to die in a car wreck, am I? When you say I must be careful, you're not suggesting I would drink and drive, are you? I'd never do that, never. I'm a careful, very vigilant driver. You can ask anyone, except my mother, of course. It is not that you will die, but you could take someone's life if you are not careful. They have an exit point at this time, you see. And if you take that wrong path, you could potentially harm this person. You need to be careful.
The gypsy was beginning to sound like Brooke's neurotic mother. Everywhere she went in life, she heard the mantra, "Be careful," and it was driving her crazy. It was like an indelible imprint that was left on her mind that could never be wiped away. The words "be careful" were haunting, but hearing them from this gypsy fortune-teller was utterly terrifying. She got the impression the gypsy was telling her that one day she'd drive under the influence of alcohol and literally go barreling into somebody else's car, killing them on impact so that they lost their lives before their due time. That would ultimately mean a prison sentence for her. Is that what the gypsy meant by her future wouldn't go as it was ordained? Because she'd be locked up in a prison cell for years and years, paying for her foolish conduct for the rest of her life? Brooke could imagine how her mother would react to this. Only this morning her mother had been going on and on at her about her driving being a little too ambitious, and Brooke being far too quick to put her foot down on the accelerator. Maybe coming to the gypsy fortune-teller meant she could ensure that this never ever happened. She could give up on alcohol immediately and take the advanced driving course that her mother had recommended. "I'm not going to kill someone, is that what you're saying?" Brooke asked, her eyes widening in terror. "Are you saying I'm going to have a head-on collision and kill a man?" "You misunderstand me. What I'm trying to tell you is that the lines on your hand suggest two paths. The path you take is your decision. The paths are not written in stone. You have the power to make the right choice. I have told you to be vigilant.
to veer on the path of your destiny, of which this man that you could potentially kill will play an intrinsic part. If you do harm him, your life will take an altogether different course. You need to do what is right, said the gypsy. Now you must go. I cannot tell you any more at this time, for this is what serves you right now. Even if the gypsy had told Brooke anything else, she would likely not have heard a word of it, for the woman had said so many dreadful things to her, and it was all a frantic whirl. Had the gypsy implied she was going to kill someone in a fatal car crash? Please God, no. The gypsy had said there were two distinct paths in her life. One where she killed a man, probably in a head-on collision, while she was under the influence of alcohol. But that was not going to happen, for wild horses would ensure Brooke never drank a stitch of alcohol ever again. Brooke should not have listened to her friends. She should have listened to her gut instincts, warning her not to have her palm read. Now she'd opened a can of worms that was impossible to close. She worried enough in her life as it was, and now her worry would reach new heights. She had enjoyed a drink from time to time, and that little pleasure in her life that enabled her to relax was no longer even an option. She needed to ensure that the path the gypsy said she could potentially take could be averted at all costs, and from now on she would drive like a snail, like her mother did, to ensure that she didn't so much as harm a fly. "Aren't you glad you went to the palm reader?" Fern asked Brooke excitedly. "The woman was absolutely amazing. She was brilliant." Brooke just nodded. Yes, she was good. How could she tell her friends that the palm reader had said she needed to be careful, as she might kill someone in a car accident? Her friends were always telling her that she had a glum approach towards life. She could only imagine what they would say if she was to share this with them. They'd probably think she was overreacting and taking what the gypsy had told her to heart. So it was best to keep these worries of hers under lock and key, and she would not share them, not even with her own mother, for if she did, Samantha Bordeaux would likely confiscate her car and tell her she couldn't ever drive again. Samantha Bordeaux believed in psychics and their ability to see the future. So if Brooke shared with her mother what had happened at the fair, her mother would quite literally fall apart at the seams and keep Brooke permanently indoors to ensure disaster never struck her down. But Brooke did not want to live like that. Fern was completely oblivious to Brooke's angst after the palm reading at the fair. She went on and on about the fortune teller. Oh my God, she was so brilliant. I'm not going to be a cat lady raising hundreds of cats as I believed I would. I'm not going to be lonely either. The fortune teller told me I'd meet a very nice man, and very soon too. She thinks he might possibly be an engineer. She sees me living in this area and having 3 kids. Oh, I can't imagine. I've always wanted children. She did suggest I might have a few fertility problems, but that I would definitely end up with 3 children. Well, she told me I'd be a wealthy woman, said Anthea. She told me that I'm going to come into a great deal of money through an inheritance or something. She says it's going to be a long while before I get married and settle down. But she does see me having a child, but only one child. But she says I'm going to, have that child later in life. A late lamb, so to speak. 1 year later, Fern's 28th birthday party had been a rip-roaring success as far as she was concerned, as everyone that had left that party that night had done so in good spirits, some singing happily to themselves, as many had drunk way too much and were more than a little inebriated. Fern had hired an excellent DJ for the event, the kind of guy that had an illustrious reputation for getting everyone on that dance floor dancing the night away. There had been pig on the spit, served with a vast selection of delicious salads that had been spread out on the dining room table, indoors, along with other delectable snacks. When Brooke had arrived at the party, she had been as stiff as a cardboard doll, wearing a desolate expression on her face that suggested she wished she wasn't there, as she knew, being teetotal that night, and being the only party pooper, by not drinking, it would be difficult to get into the spirit of the occasion. She'd probably, as a result, have a very dull time. For a whole year since her reading with a gypsy, she hadn't touched a drop of alcohol, and she secretly longed for a glass of wine. But she knew one glass would lead to another, and then another, and another, because that's what always happened when you enjoyed a good glass of wine. And she couldn't allow that to happen, so she hadn't an option. She couldn't drink. Brooke was happy to be at her friend's 28th birthday party, of course, but she did find it extremely difficult to relax, as ever since the event at the fair, when she had received that palm reading by the gypsy, she could think of little else. When Brooke had arrived at the party, she had been as stiff as a cardboard doll, wearing what could only be described as a desolate, forsaken expression on her face that suggested she wished she wasn't there. She knew that the reason why she was unhappy to be here was because she was teetotal, and she'd obviously be the only party pooper tonight, not drinking and getting into the spirit of the occasion, and as a consequence would probably have an extremely dull time. For a whole year since her palm reading with a gypsy, she hadn't dared touch a drop of alcohol, and she secretly longed for a glass of wine. But she knew that one glass would ultimately lead to another and another, and she knew it was not even an option to drink. She couldn't take the risk. Brooke was happy to be at her friend's 28th birthday party, but she found it very difficult to relax these days, as ever since the event at the fair, when she'd received that palm reading by the gypsy there, she could think of little else than the possibility that she could potentially take the wrong path, which would ultimately lead to a catastrophic car accident. So her driving these days was very, very cautious, and she'd taken her mother's advice and gone on that advanced driving course, which had done very little to inspire her confidence, for she was constantly nervously looking over her shoulders, wondering when something quite dreadful would happen. It would seem she had become almost as neurotic as her mother was. She had come to Fern's party feeling a little dejected, as she'd liked to have enjoyed a few glasses of wine with her friends, and let her hair down for a change, for alcohol had done wonders in relaxing her. But after her interaction with that gypsy, she swore she'd never drink a drop of alcohol ever again, although she had never shared with her two best friends why she had very suddenly become teetotal. And both Fern and Anthea had been befuddled by Brooke's resistance to drink, because these days, as a consequence, she had become a whole lot more intense and less fun to be around. When Brooke arrived at the party looking gorgeous in her black sparkly dress and strappy silver high heels, she had stolen the show. She was a very attractive young woman, but sadly she looked as uncomfortable in this social setting as a fish thrown out of its goldfish bowl, as even at the best of times, Brooke had never really enjoyed large social gatherings, without indulging in alcohol to iron away her inhibitions. So being here, without drinking a thing, was not her idea of a good time. Fern had noticed that Philip Joubert, a handsome young man, whom had known them for years growing up, could not keep his eyes off Brooke. You could see for a mile off he was completely intoxicated by her, but he'd secretly been nursing a crush on her for years, as far back as when they were kids riding their bicycles around the local area. The problem was that only Brooke appeared completely oblivious to her secret admirer, that had clandestinely admired her from a distance, but never seemed able to do anything about it. Even Philip's own friends had told him to get some balls and go for the plunge and ask Brooke out, but he'd never been able to do this. "What's your problem, bro?" they would tease him. "What's the worst thing that could happen? She can say no, and then you just move on." "I just can't ask her," Philip had said. "You don't understand. She's the only girl for me." "Look, bro, I hate to blow your bubble, but there are other fish out in the sea," he was told. It would seem that Philip Joubert, who had so much going for him, as he ran his own successful business, and was a flamboyant entrepreneur, who drove a bright yellow Lexus, and was incredibly good-looking to boot, when it came to his love life, his shyness to make any advances towards Brooke, whom he had wished to marry one day, had kept him anchored to the same mooring place for years and years. Everyone was getting into the spirit of the occasion, tucking into delicious snacks
that had been placed out on the table in the dining room by Fern's very attentive mother, who had spared no expense for this party when it came to providing the most lavish spread. People could help themselves to whatever they fancied, and the delicious scent of the pig on the spit cooking outside sent its savoury aromas throughout the house, so people quickly became hungry and gluttonously tucked into massive platefuls of this juicy, very succulent roasted meat that was so tender it fell off the fork when you ate it. There was a help-yourself bar on the lawn, where you could ply yourself with about as much alcohol as you desired, and there was also a dance floor on the patio, which overlooked the turquoise swimming pool. People were bopping away merrily to the music, and laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air, but no one seemed to be brave or adventurous enough to go swimming, as there was indeed a slight nip in the air. Fern looked a little out of place sitting on one of those swing chairs that overlooked the swimming pool, with her hand tightly clasping a glass of Coca-Cola. She looked utterly miserable, as her downward smile was doing her no favours, and with a look like that on her face, Fern doubted that Philip Joubert would ever pluck up the courage to ask Brooke out. When Fern had confided in Brooke once that she genuinely believed that Philip Joubert had a crush on her, Brooke had laughed at the very idea, and brushed such a preposterous suggestion away, like the dog hairs off a coat, for she believed the idea was completely ridiculous. "I've known him for years, Fern," she had said in a clipped, no-nonsense tone of voice. "If that guy liked me, I think I'd know about it, don't you? And besides, he'd have asked me out a long time ago." "Not necessarily," said Fern. "I've seen the way he looks at you, Brooke. I believe he's been smitten over you for years, but I think he's shy, too shy to ask you out." Brooke had shrugged her shoulders. "I think I'd know if Philip Joubert liked me. If a man likes you, he looks at you, doesn't he? Philip never looks at me when I talk to him. But that's because he's shy, you little nitwit." "Do you like him?" Fern had asked her. "I mean, if he asked you out, would you be interested?" "Well, I've always liked Philip," came Brooke's rather prompt reply. But if she liked him romantically, she had given nothing away. But Fern had a gut feeling that Brooke had always secretly liked Philip romantically, but was too proud to admit her true feelings. Fern took Althea to one side at the party and said, "I know Brooke is refusing to drink alcohol these days. She's become all the more miserable. I mean, look at her, sitting there on the swing chair, looking like she's waiting in a dental reception for a root canal treatment. I wish she hadn't come to my party if she's going to look like this. It's so obvious she doesn't want to be here. And I'm worried she's going to ruin the mood of the party for everybody else. If anybody hangs around her, they'll want to leave the party. I don't want her ruining it for me. She's in such a cranky mood, don't you think?" "You're right," said Althea. "She does look miserable. In the past she'd always enjoy a glass of wine or something, and it helped her unwind. But now she looks pretty unapproachable. I very much doubt that Philip Joubert is ever going to have the courage to ask Brooke out. He hasn't been able to keep his eyes off her all evening, I notice." "Well, good luck to him," said Fern, "because if I were a man, I'd keep the hell away from the likes of Brooke. When she's wearing a boot face in particular. I don't think she has any idea how bad it looks to sit there looking so miserably unhappy on the chair. I have half a mind to tell her to just go straight home, and not to be bothered with my party." "I blame those parents of hers," said Anthea. "I mean, she's so cool when she unwinds, but tonight she pretty much looks like a saber-toothed tiger with an agonizing toothache. I want her to enjoy herself at your party, Fern. I can't bear her to look so glum like this. Remember how happy-go-lucky she was at the fair last year, until we visited the fortune-teller's tent. Since then she's become dreadfully serious over everything. What can we do to loosen her up a little?" "I've just had a brilliant idea. I can't believe I didn't think of it before," said Fern, with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. "We know Brooke loosens up when she has a bit of alcohol in her system, so that's what we need to do. She becomes easy-going and chilled. She's a pleasure to be around. I like her after she's had a glass of wine or something. We could slip some vodka into the non-alcoholic punch and give it to her, insisting that there's no alcohol in it. She won't know any better. You can't taste vodka. What she doesn't know won't hurt her.
but we'll have to insist on driving her home tonight. Or she could, of course, stay over and go home in the morning. But I think getting her a little sloshed will do her the world of good, and she'll end up having an amazing time." It would seem plying Brooke with vodka in her non-alcoholic punch had almost certainly done the trick. They could see their friend, who was usually as stiff as a piece of hardboard, was loosening up significantly. She had become tiddly, but the great news was that her inhibitions appeared to have melted away. She was chuckling and laughing with the rest of the party guests, and appeared to be having the time of her life. She began flirting tirelessly with everyone, including the Red Rose family big ginger tabby called Popcorn, who eyed her with wary yellow eyes and then hurriedly scrambled away, finally taking refuge under the couch, as Brooke began declaring her undying love to the cat, who was not used to such effusive gestures. Even Mrs. Redrose, who was Fern's mother, and was supervising the party, as she was a caterer by profession, had turned around and asked her daughter what the hell was wrong with Brooke, for she seemed rather inebriated. "I don't know how to say this to you, Fern, but Brooke has had far too much to drink tonight. She seems to find everything hilariously funny. A moment ago she was proposing to Popcorn, our cat, who gave her the brush off and scampered under the couch to hide from her. And I'm quite sure Arthur's doing much the same. If that wasn't bad enough, she's been affectionately stroking the leather couch in the lounge and telling it what a good girl it is. There's something terribly wrong with Brooke tonight. I've never seen her behave like this before. She's in no condition to drive from the party. We need to make sure we keep a firm eye on her." "Oh, Mum, keep your hair on," said Fern. "This is my party. You know what a stick in the mud Brooke can be. I blame her parents for making her increasingly paranoid these days. She refuses to drink any alcohol at the moment. She's become teetotal ever since we went to that fair last year. She gets overly cautious about everything, is always looking over her shoulder. It's a good thing for her to let her hair down once in a while and enjoy herself for a change. Surely you saw how miserable she looked when she first arrived at my party. Now she's having a whale of a time and wildly flirting with everything and everyone. I don't recall a time I've seen her unwind like this. And I really don't care a jot if she's proposing to our cat and telling the couch that she's a good girl. At least she's having a ball, and it's a long time since that has happened." "Oh, I don't know. What on earth has got into you, Fern? If you consider wildly flirting with a couch and proposing to our very bemused cat your idea of having a good time, you're in for a rude awakening. Brooke is inebriated, extremely drunk. What did you do? She's taken something weird, hasn't she? Don't tell me you've slipped something into her drink to make her go a little loopy." Mrs. Redrose could see Fern suddenly going very red in the face, and she let out a heavy sigh. "You didn't, did you, Fern? I hope to God you didn't. You wouldn't be that reckless, would you?" "What are you talking about, Mum?" said Fern, trying to look innocent. "Don't give me that butter wouldn't melt in your mouth kind of look, Fern. I've known you all my life. You are my daughter, after all. So do me a favour and quit playing the innocent with me. Did you or did you not spike Fern's non-alcoholic punch tonight?" "Ma'am, relax, won't you? I just put a little vodka in her drink, that's all. No big deal. She needs to let her hair down for a change, and alcohol can loosen your inhibitions. I just want Brooke to have a great time at my party. I don't want her being a wet blanket all night long and ruining the party spirit for everybody." "Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but spiking someone's drink is completely reckless. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed in your insouciant behaviour. I would have expected a lot better from you, Fern. If Brooke wants to be teetotal, then that's her decision, not yours, and you need to respect that. You're going to have to make absolutely sure that Brooke gets home safely tonight. And for goodness sake, do not under any circumstances let Samantha Bordeaux see her daughter arriving home in such a dreadful state as this. I won't hear the end of it from her, I can assure you of that. What the hell were you thinking?
Don't worry, Mum. I'll make absolutely sure that Brooke gets home safely tonight. Or better than that, she can actually stay overnight with us and go home in the morning. And by then she'll definitely be sober, and Samantha Bordeaux will know nothing about it.
Well, make sure you don't keep her out of your sight for a second. I don't want her wandering off in this dreadful state. If she fell into our swimming pool, God forbid, she'd probably drown. Her head is all over the place this evening, and God only knows how Samantha Bordeaux would react if she was to see her daughter right now.
That's not going to happen, Mum. And I'm not going to put any more vodka into her drink, I promise. I'm sure she'll sober up quickly.
I'm so very glad you have so much faith in that, Fern. I'm afraid I don't share it with you. But you are the one that is responsible for lacing Brooke's drink. So I want you to watch her all night, like a hawk, because I don't want that girl wandering off and doing something stupid.
Fern had said her goodbyes to most of the young folk that had attended her party, but there was a residue of close family friends that had stayed behind and chosen to sleep over. They were all contentedly gathered around the fire pit, telling ghost stories together. No one observed Brooke, who had been placed in a bed in the spare bedroom to sleep off the excesses of her alcohol. Nobody saw her rising from her bed and fumbling around awkwardly as she made her way to the front door to get to the driveway where her car was parked. She knew she needed to get home as quickly as possible. She had no idea how long she'd been asleep for in the Red Rose spare bedroom, or how she'd even got there in the first place. She was feeling groggy and struggling to keep her eyes open. It was a continuous battle for her. It didn't do to drive home in this sleepy state, so she'd better leave right away before things got significantly worse for her, as Brooke didn't want to stay at the Red Rose house overnight. She was not sure how late it was, but even in her slightly inebriated state, she had a vague recollection of telling her mother she'd be home very late, and not to wait up for her. But knowing her mother, if she didn't return home at all, her mother would be overwrought with worry. Brooke knew she didn't need to say goodbye to Fern, because that would mean looking for her, and common courtesies at this time of night certainly did not need to be engaged, as Fern would perfectly understand Brooke's need to get home. At least the alcohol had worn off, as Brooke was becoming marginally more sober, but she was still feeling tiddly and a wee bit confused and disorientated, as so much of the party had become all but an ambiguous blur for her. If the truth be told, she couldn't really remember the party very well, which was peculiarly odd, as Brooke couldn't understand why her memory had become so obscure and so vague when she hadn't drunk a thing, and yet she felt as if she'd drunk a whole crate of beers. Brooke's head was thumping violently, as if a headache was suddenly brewing. It hadn't even occurred to her that her two best friends had been plying her with alcohol all evening, and Mrs. Redrose had told her daughter that no more vodka could be permitted to be sneakily placed into Brooke's punch under any circumstances, and yet Brooke was oblivious to all of this. Brooke wobbled rather precariously on her long, slender legs, her knees almost giving way beneath her, but thankfully, against all the odds, she managed to find her way to her car. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Brooke had looked so elegant this evening. Her long, slinky evening dress that was covered in silver glitter looked as if she was wearing a starry night on her dress, and some people had even said as much. But right now she could feel the nausea rising up in the back of her throat. She didn't feel terribly good, and she was sure her reflection reflected how dreadfully bilious she felt. It was so uncomfortable wearing her strappy silver high heels this evening that her mother had warned her might actually break her neck if she didn't watch where she was going. But such trivial concerns did not filter into her mind, muddied by the ravaging effects of alcohol, that Brooke wasn't even aware she'd actually consumed. It was a dark, congenial night, where the abundant trills of crickets and frogs happily filled the atmosphere with their cheerful chorus, and the smell of lingering wood smoke wafted in the air. No one observed Brooke disappearing like a faint ghostly shadow, as everyone lightly assumed that she was lying safely on one of the beds in the Red Rose spare bedroom, sleeping off a rarely bad hangover. Brooke shivered as a cool breeze antagonizingly nudged at her bare skin, rather like an uncomfortable cold hand. She'd have liked to have been wearing a sweater tonight, for the temperature had dropped significantly. She sank gratefully into her car seat, like a slumped-over rag doll. She was still fighting the relentless urge to fall asleep again, and wondered why she'd been off all night. Perhaps she was coming down with something. She found the car keys in their usual place in the glove compartment, and started up the engine with a mighty bang, and then drove away into the night, like a ghostly shadow of a car that was there 1 minute and gone the next, for no one even saw her leave the Red Rose premises that night. Once she left the illumination of Fern Red Rose's farmhouse, her car descended into the darkness, for in this part of the Pacific Northwest there were no street lights to be seen anywhere, as most of the houses in this Pacific area were situated on sizable plots of land, and wherever you looked there were tall lofty trees, and yet more and more trees, for it was a heavily wooded area, substantial in size. So driving around at night could be extremely intimidating, but Brooke had done it often enough when she was sober. So driving, even at night in her groggy state, seemed almost instinctive. Her head was thumping madly, and she felt the nasty nausea welling up in the back of her throat. Why was her mind such a foggy blur, as if she was trying to look through a veil of mist to remember the last few hours of the party? Maybe she'd got some food poisoning from one of the hors d'oeuvres. Perhaps it was the lobster she had eaten. It must have been that. Seafood had always made her feel rather queasy, and it would explain the reason why she was feeling so off-colour. All Brooke could think about was the lovely warm bed that awaited her at home, but unbeknown to her, her driving on this night was erratic to say the very least. The roads were so dark, but even though Brooke was feeling woozy, she knew her way home like a migrating pigeon, even with her eyes closed. In an instant, like a flash of light, she suddenly observed a dark shadow walking down the middle of the road, but her heavy eyelids, arrested by the desperate need to fall asleep, felt like concrete blocks that were weighing her down. She squeezed her eyes tightly together to get a better focus, for her vision was fuzzy. She could see the figure was carrying a torch, and didn't appear to have heard Brooke's car approach. Brooke's reaction times under the influence of alcohol had slowed down significantly, despite having taken an advanced driving course earlier in the year. She slammed her foot down on the brakes as hard as she could, but instead of pressing the brakes, she accidentally put her foot on the accelerator, so her car abruptly swung forwards, knocking the figure over on the road. Oh my God, what had she done? She felt a loud bumping sound beneath her wheels, and in that moment she was jolted out of her drunken stupor by the shock of what had just transpired. For a moment she stopped her car and scrambled awkwardly out of the door. She ran over to the figure lying on the ground. She recognized the man immediately. It was Philip Joubert, the man from her past, that had been nursing a crush on Brooke for years that she knew nothing about. He was lying on the road groaning and clutching his leg uncomfortably, and there was so much blood everywhere. Brooke had never seen so much blood. She was certain that he was dying. He called out to her, "Brooke, stay with me! Don't go! Don't go! Get help!" But Brooke ran over to a bush on the side of the road and violently began to hurl up the contents of her stomach, and it just didn't seem to stop. The sight of all that blood was just all too much for her, and had made her stomach recoil. Suddenly she remembered the gypsy's premonition, and realized to her horror it had all but come true. She had killed a man on the road. Once she'd finished heaving up the contents of her stomach, she was about to rush over to Philip Joubert, who was still lying in the middle of the road. She knew she had to get help, even though help would be a long time in coming, and she suspected that Philip Joubert was already dead, because she had run him over. Her reaction times were shrouded by the groggy state that made everything she attempted to do feel laboriously ungainly and incredibly clumsy. She had to use her cell phone, didn't she? But where was it? It wasn't in the car. But then she had a vague recollection. She'd left the purse on the swing chair on the Red Rose patio. So fat lot of good it was for her now. She'd have to drive back to the Red Rose house to get help. And she knew it would be too late by the time she got back. She was caught in a nightmare, and she wasn't sure what to do. All she could think about was that she had killed Philip Joubert. He might be holding on to life by a thin silver thread, but that silver thread might just snap in any moment. She was caught up in the most dreadful nightmare and wasn't sure what she should do. She moved away from the bush, where she'd been hurling up the contents of her stomach for a long time. Her eyes carefully darted towards Philip Joubert, who was still lying in the road. There was a heaviness in her heart, for she feared very much that he was dead. But then she saw them, rushing towards Philip. What the hell? Was she even seeing right? There were two massive creatures, who had reached Philip Joubert and were standing over him. She had to be dreaming. She must be dreaming. What was she even seeing? It just couldn't be right, could it? What on earth was wrong with her? Now she appeared to be hallucinating, seeing things that just could not be there, as if she was caught up in a parallel universe. She could hear the urgent sounds of two distinct human-like voices that were speaking in a strange, unorthodox language that she'd never heard before. They sounded like two paramedics trying to fuss over a dying patient and administer life-saving procedures. Brooke realized that she was seeing two massive Bigfoot. They were so gargantuan in size, she felt completely daunted by their mere presence. They didn't even appear to notice or observe her presence. They were swooning over Philip Joubert. She could hear Philip Joubert groaning. The two voices were speaking together very fast, backwards and forwards. One voice sounded distinctly female, the other male. Mantala, kolapatina, hanshankwi, hasipata, huko, hila, dikato, omatisa. The male Bigfoot was tearing up Philip's shirt, bandaging his leg up, as if making a tourniquet for him. Brooke was completely spellbound. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She wondered if she was completely losing her mind. Finally, the male Bigfoot stood up straight and tall, and Brooke nearly fainted by the sheer size of him, for he was easily 9 foot, and so wide across the shoulders. He hurled Philip over his shoulders, and the two Bigfoots disappeared into the night, like two dark shadows. Brooke was now convinced she definitely was losing her mind. There was no doubt about that. Had she just imagined everything she'd seen? It had all happened so very fast. She returned to her car, and once again sank onto the seat. She wondered if it had all been an illusory dream. Finally, she started up the engine again, and made her way back home. The tiredness she felt was all-consuming. Even though throwing up had made her feel a little less queasy, and a tiny bit more human, she did recall getting through the front door, and then she heard her mother's voice, somewhere in the background, and then everything went completely black. Brooke awoke the following day to a head that was spinning wildly. She felt groggy and had a splitting headache, and nausea clung to the back of her throat. She glanced at the nightstand to look at her clock and did a double take. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. It couldn't be. That was impossible. Had she really been asleep for that long? She sat up for a moment to get her bearings, having no memory of how she'd even got here. She was crippled with confusion, unable to distinguish fact from fiction, and above everything else, she had experienced the most strange dream, all about Bigfoots and Philip Joubert of all people. "Oh, you're up, are you, finally?" said Mrs. Bordeaux, coming into her bedroom, carrying a tray with toast, boiled egg, and orange juice, which she placed in front of Brooke on her bed. But the tone of her voice was one that didn't sound too pleased, so Brooke sensed her mother was not happy with her. "Do you realize what time it is, Brooke?" came her mother's scathing voice. "Yes, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon," Brooke admitted. "I was so tired, Mum. I must have slept in late after the party.
I feel really sick and nauseous. I've got a terrible headache." "Well, I can't say I'm surprised. You were as drunk as a skunk when you got in last night. I am absolutely appalled. How could you drink and drive like that? It is completely irresponsible. What were you thinking? You took an advanced driving course. You should know better. You told me you were never, ever going to drink again. You rolled into the house last night, looking like a zombie. You were in quite the state, babbling away about Bigfoots and Philip Joubert. Honestly, everything that came out of your mouth last night was nonsensical rubbish. Me and your father had to carry you to bed. I am so disappointed in you. I really am, Brooke. It's a miracle you got home in one piece. That's all I can say. Do you realize you could have driven into a tree or something and killed yourself? Because you weren't all there. You can't drive when you're intoxicated, Brooke. How often have I drummed this into you? But you fail to listen."
"But I didn't drink and drive last night. I think I ate something that was off, so I wasn't feeling terribly well. But I'm teetotal, Mum."
"Oh, you could have fooled me. Honestly, Brooke, you think I was born yesterday, do you? You came into the house absolutely drunk, and you smelt as if you'd been throwing up as well. It was most unpleasant."
"But I only drank non-alcoholic punch, Mum, at the party."
"Oh, you can deny it as much as you like, Brooke, but it's not going to wash with me. I know a drunk person when I see one. You were half-cut last night, you really were. Mrs. Redrose was in quite the state, you know. She phoned me up this morning to ask how you were, to make sure you arrived home safely. She was very upset that you drove home from the party last night without any supervision. She said you were supposed to be sleeping over at the house. They even made a bed up for you in the spare bedroom. She said you left your purse on the swing chair, and that your car wasn't in the driveway. So she assumed you must have driven home. She said you were terribly drunk last night. Apparently you proposed to her cat Popcorn and were stroking a couch, telling it to be a good girl. And now you're going to tell me that that was because you ate something that was slightly off. When you eat something that is a little funny, you don't start talking like that, Brooke. You should know that."
"You're kidding, right? I didn't do all that, did I? How embarrassing!"
"You're telling me. And no, I'm not kidding."
"I proposed to the Red Rose cat," said Brooke, looking stumped. "But, Mum, I promise you, you have my word, I didn't drink any alcohol last night. But I don't remember any of this. Why don't I remember any of it?"
"Of course you don't remember. You were drunk, Brooke. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself for overindulging in alcohol like this. And I've never seen such bizarre behaviour from a drunk in all my born days. Drinking certainly is not for you, my girl. You embarrassed yourself awfully last night. At one point I gather you were dancing on the Red Ferns table and singing songs with your hairbrush. Everybody was watching you. I gather it was Philip Joubert, that boy from your childhood that helped you down from the table and gave you a glass of milk to try and help sober you up. I gather he was awfully sweet to you. I believe he didn't want you to make a spectacle of yourself. He stayed by your side faithfully all evening, and even put you into the bed in the spare bedroom at the Red Rose house. I understand you were staggering around the place. At some point you must have got up from the Red Rose spare bed and driven yourself home. And frankly, I'm surprised you made it home alive. Anything could have happened to you on that road, Brooke. What on earth were you thinking? I just thank God you took that advanced driving course, because I think it might have very well saved your life last night."
Brooke was mortified by her mother's startling revelations. She couldn't believe she had embarrassed herself so much at Fern's party. But why couldn't she remember it all? "Mum, don't look at me like that, please. I know you're ashamed of what I did last night. But I promise you I don't remember any of this. Everything is such a blur."
I remember arriving at Fern's party. I remember sitting on the swing couch there, overlooking the swimming pool. I remember, talking to Philip Joubert. He came over to me, and we had a nice chat. But after that, everything goes blank. Of course everything goes blank, and of course it's a blur for you. If you drink so much, what do you expect? You came into the house last night looking a sorry sight, like something the cat had dragged in. And even the cat drags in better-looking things than you were last night. Frankly, your father couldn't believe how dreadful you looked. He was utterly dismayed. You could have killed yourself last night, Brooke. I want you to get that into your head. Everyone knows you do not drive with alcohol in your system under any circumstances. You returned home prattling on about Bigfoot and about Philip Joubert. Honestly, love, I don't know what got into you last night. You weren't your normal, reliable self. Oh, I can't believe any of this. I just don't understand. I had no intention of drinking at Fern's party, Mum. I told you I've given up alcohol for good. So why is last night so foggy to me? Someone must have spiked that punch I was drinking. That must be it. Don't be in denial, love. It's very, very unattractive. There's nothing I loathe more than someone who doesn't take responsibility for their own actions. You should be ashamed of yourself. What were you thinking? I don't know, Mum, said Brooke, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't believe I embarrassed myself like this. That's the least of your worries, dear. Next time you go to a party, your father will be dropping you off himself and picking you up. And I would appreciate it if you give up alcohol for good, because it could be the death of you, Brooke, if you're not more careful. We cannot have a repeat of what happened last night. Philip Joubert's account. I have been in love with Brooke Bordeaux since I was about 8 years old. I was too shy to express my feelings towards her, and as I got significantly older, my shyness became all the more crippling for me. I found myself completely incapable of even asking Brooke out for a casual date. I was terrified of being rejected by her, so I would watch her from a distance, like you might appreciatively observe a beautiful bird of prey soaring in the sky above your head. But if you get close to the bird, it's certain to fly away. I guess I felt that way about Brooke. Of course, over the years I've dated lots of other women, but I was not caught up in the fear of rejection with those people, because if the relationship went pear-shaped, it would be easy to pick up the pieces and start all over again. I guess you could say my heart was never invested in any of those relationships. I could handle these women letting me down very easily. But if Brooke Bordeaux refused my advances, it would quite literally have been the end of the world for me. I know people out there say there are many fish in the sea, but I beg to disagree. I had tunnel vision as far as Brooke Bordeaux was concerned, and there was no one out there that was more suitable for me than she was. I knew I wanted her to be my wife since the age of 8, as ridiculous as that may sound. I never told anyone I was nursing such feelings towards her, because when you're 8 years old, you're not really supposed to be thinking about who you will marry one day. But I just knew Brooke was the girl for me. I had become a successful entrepreneur in my business, and made a great living for myself. I was confident and assertive when it came to my business practices, but with a woman like Brooke Bordeaux, whenever I was in her company, I became all but a blubbering idiot. Even when I spoke to her, I made a complete spectacle of myself. I was so nervous. I was never completely sure of what she thought about me. I guess she assumed I was desperately shy and demure by nature. As children growing up, she knew me as the boy with very few words, who would give her a shy smile and hurriedly look away. I was terrified she'd be able to see my devotedly adoring puppy dog eyes drooling over her like a dog over a bone. I remember when I was 16 years old, I finally summoned up the courage to ask Brooke out. She was sitting on the lawn at school reading a book, and as I walked over to her, another young man came up to her from absolutely nowhere, and I could see them talking and laughing together. So my confidence took a staggering nosedive, and I scurried away like a frightened pigeon. Brooke went out with Tom Spikes for about 4 years, I believe, and they seemed almost inseparable. But one day I learnt the surprising news that they had broken up. I felt defeated rather than triumphant about the great news. You see, Tom Spikes was nothing like me. He was the antithesis of me in every regard, and it concerned me that he was Brooke's type. He was one of these people that was openly assertive, cocky, highly opinionated, and exceedingly arrogant. I've never been like that. Tom Spike was very rough around the edges, and had a propensity to be quite direct to the point of rudeness. He was the kind of guy that abandoned chivalry to the side of the road, and forgot to be a gentleman. Over the last few years I had enjoyed 3 long-term relationships with women, all that went completely pear-shaped. I think by then my mother was exasperated by what she saw as an extreme inability on my part to commit. My mother was convinced that my last girlfriend, Olivia, would one day become my wife. In truth, I think she rather fancied Olivia, as her new daughter-in-law, so to speak. She even brought Olivia a bunch of bridal magazines, probably as a way of putting pressure on me to propose. My mother presumptuously thought that I was stalling, and needed a push in the deep end. I rather suspect the two conspired together, because my mother wanted to get this detached son of hers to finally make a commitment. Olivia was of course showered with all these bridal magazines, and began to show me pictures of all the dresses, saying how pretty they were. She began to look at me with doe eyes, as if she was half expecting me to drop to my knees and suddenly propose to her. It genuinely scared the bejesus out of me. I guess the insurmountable pressure put on me made me quickly end things very neatly with her. And yes, I broke her heart in the process. But I knew I couldn't marry her when my heart faithfully belonged to someone else, even though the person whom my heart belonged to didn't even know that. If it wasn't bad enough that I'd hurt my ex-girlfriend, my breakup with Olivia appeared to have crushed my mother considerably, who didn't handle the bad news well. Anyone would think I'd broken her heart, and she was the one that was being dumped. I guess she was convinced I'd marry Olivia. She was very fond of her, and they had a great deal in common, and would often go off to town together, enjoying coffee at a local coffee shop, or even spending a spa day together. After my breakup with Olivia, when I went around to visit my parents one day, I was to discover my mother sobbing in the corner of the kitchen. All she could say to me through puffy red eyes was, "How could you, Philip? Olivia was perfect for you. Absolutely perfect. What the hell is wrong with you?" After that, my mother slipped into a long, self-pitying sulk, and blatantly refused to talk to me for a long while. So whenever I visited my parents' house, she would ignore me. She was completely devastated about my breakup, but one day she discreetly took me to one side and had it out with me. I guess I knew it was coming. My mother needed to vent, so she let me have it. "What is going on with you, Philip?" she asked me. The tone of her voice was very snappy. "Why did you end things with Olivia? I don't understand you. She was such a delightful young lady. I thought she was so right for you in every way. She's heartbroken, you know, that you ended things with her. She doesn't know what she's done to deserve any of this. And quite frankly, I'm appalled at your treatment of her. You've been going out with her for 2.5 years, and then you drop her like a hot potato, just when it looked like things were getting very serious between the two of you. I wonder if you had an attack of cold feet, perhaps. I rather suspect it was all those bridal magazines that I gave Olivia that scared you half to death. Maybe it made you panic. That was my fault, not Olivia's. I thought buying them for Olivia would give you a push in the right direction, but it seems I was wrong." "Olivia hasn't done anything wrong, Mum. It's not personal. We're just not right together, that's all. I think your plying her with dozens of wedding magazines didn't help. Talk about putting pressure on someone to make a commitment. That wasn't nice, Mum. I'm sorry, but it wasn't. No guy would appreciate his mother doing that. Look, Philip, I was convinced you were going to marry Olivia one day. You were so great together, the two of you. You needed a push in the right direction, that's all. And it wasn't fair on Olivia to give her false hope. She invested a great deal in her relationship with you, you know. Well, what you did was give me the push I obviously needed, Mum, as I was able to end things with Olivia. And if you must know, I'm sincerely happy the relationship is finally over. It wouldn't have worked long-term for us. So it's best it's over, even if the demise was not very pretty. But I don't understand you, Philip. Olivia was the whole package. I very much doubt there is anyone out there better than she is. Girls with her qualities are rare to find, let me tell you. This isn't about Olivia. It's about me, Mum. It's not personal. It is the way it is. But you make no sense, Philip. Olivia was so perfect for you in every way. Even your father thought as much. He said she was a keeper. Young women like her don't come along every day. She would make a fabulous mother and wife one day. You can't dispute that. Olivia is very good with children, you know. In your opinion, Mum, she's perfect for me. But we beg to differ on this one. My mother rolled her eyes in exasperation, like she did when I was a little boy and failed to understand a math equation. You know what's wrong with you, Philip? I can see what's going on here. Your generation is caught up in this illusional world that is so out of touch with reality. Everything online is airbrushed. Young people these days glamorize their photographs to make themselves look like magazine cover spreads, so that their physical imperfections are all but ironed away at the touch of a button. So men and women have built up in their head these preposterous, unrealistic expectations about each other that have no bearing on reality whatsoever. Not everyone is that idealistic, Mum. I'm not delusional like that. Of course I know people out there touch up their photographs. I'm not stupid like that. Oh, but you are. So are the people of your generation. Fools is an appropriate word to use on all of them. I hate to burst your bubble, love, but perfection does not exist. You see these women on land wondering why they can't get a man, and you can see that no one is ever good enough for them, as their expectations are unreasonably high, which is why they're going to end up very lonely people indeed. And the same could be said for you, son. I've got news for you. No one is perfect, not even the models on magazines, who have been airbrushed within an inch of their lives, so that in reality they look nothing like their cover. When I met your father, he wasn't physically perfect. In fact, his hair was thinning on the crown. His teeth needed fixing up, and he was extremely unfit back then. But guess what? I fell head over heels in love with him. Your father was a big teddy bear with the most charming personality and a huge heart, as well as a fabulous sense of humour. I was aware of his shortcomings as he is of mine, and even these days I've got used to some of his less than redeeming qualities. He leaves the toilet seat up all the time. He can't pick up after himself. And the cupboard is always left open. Cupboards everywhere, all over our house that I have to close. That's what your father is like, but I love him, warts and all. And I'm glad he did get his teeth fixed, I have to admit on that one. But what I'm trying to say is that if you think somebody out there is more perfect than Olivia, you are very mistaken. Mum, you're preaching to the converted. I'm not stupid. I agree with you, lots of people in my generation are idealistic because of social media. And some of the women out there are way too picky about the men they pursue. I'm aware of how superficial and shallow social media can be, and its negative influences over people. Perfection, as you say, does not exist. It's not that I'm not giving any of the women I've met over the years a chance. What you don't get, Mum, is I just don't love them. It would be wrong to marry someone I didn't love, don't you think? What are you saying? You went out with Olivia for 2.5 years and you're saying you didn't love her, said my mother, snorting in disgust. How could you string her along like this, Philip? I liked her very much, Mum. I was fond of her. But love her? No, I did not love her. Well, if you carry on this way, sweetheart, all the good women out there will be snapped up, and you'll be left a very lonely old man. And you know what? You'll only have yourself to blame. Me and your father aren't getting any younger, you know.
What's that supposed to mean, Mum? My mother grimaced, looking extremely uncomfortable, as she deliberately avoided my gaze.
Well, me and your father would like to be grandparents one day, wouldn't we? It's hard for you to understand that, but at this rate it's never going to happen for us.
This time I was the one that rolled my eyes, and I said very scathingly, "Talk about laying on pressure, Mum. You did it with Olivia, and now you're doing it again."
I'm not laying on pressure. As I was saying, your generation deals more with illusion than reality. That's why there's so many lonely singletons out there, wondering what they've done wrong, why they've been left on the shelf to be forgotten like an outdated can of baked beans. They fail to see that their expectations in love are far too unrealistic, and had they been more forgiving, they might actually be caught up in a loving relationship.
So you think I should propose to Olivia and be done with it? Is that what you're saying, Mum? I can read between the lines.
Well, it wouldn't do you any harm, would it, to take the bull by the horns? You're almost 30, for goodness sake, and I think Olivia would make you terribly happy. You will grow to love her, even if you don't love her now. I don't think you'd find better than her. I really don't.
She's not the woman I love, Mother, I blurted out indignantly. Why should I marry a woman I don't love? At this, my mother's jaws dropped open.
So you are in love with someone, Philip?
She asked excitedly, barely able to conceal the bright light that had suddenly come on in her eyes.
Who are you in love with, son? You are so secretive. Why didn't you say something?
I don't think it's any of your business, Mum. I'd rather not elaborate if you don't mind. My mother was not easily put off and said,
Well, why haven't you told me about this woman? And why haven't you asked her out? I mean, I'm getting the strange feeling that she doesn't even know how you feel about her. And if you sit back and do nothing to address your feelings, you're going to let that ship go by in the night. Have you not heard the saying, strike while the iron is hot?
You've got it in a nutshell, Mum. The woman that I have feelings for doesn't have a clue how I feel about her.
Sweetheart, what on earth is going on with you? Why do you have such a problem expressing yourself? You do need to get your act together, and fast. You need to push up the backside, you really do. You remind me so much of your father in this regard. So reticent you are to make a move on a woman you really like. I was the one that had to ask your father out when we were dating. It seems you're doing the very same thing with this lovely lady. If you don't ask her out, Philip, somebody else will, and then it'll be too late for you. If I wanted to buy a house, for example, I wouldn't just sit back and watch somebody else buy the place from beneath my nose. That is exactly what you're doing here.
My mother was absolutely right, of course, as she was about so many things. I'm quite sure that Brooke had no idea how completely smitten I was about her. My infatuation towards her had been clandestine, and I'd been nursing it for a very, very long time. I knew that Brooke Bordeaux was going to be at Fern's 28th birthday party that night, and I had decided to take my mother's salient advice. Tonight was the night that I would take the plunge. I would dive into the deep end and ask Brooke Bordeaux out, even if it meant I drowned in the process. Some risks were well worth taking. In truth, I couldn't believe Brooke had not been snapped up by a handsome young man a long time ago. But I think some men have been wary towards her over the years, as Brooke tends to wear an expression on her face that makes her look somewhat unapproachable. But I know underneath the starched veneer that woman has a marshmallow heart, and so many endearing qualities that I have loved so much. Growing up, I observed what a nurturing and loving nature Brooke really had, which was one of the quintessential reasons I had fallen for her so hard at such a young age. It was at 8 years old, 6 of us kids happened to find a dying kitten lying in the middle of the road. It certainly looked as if someone had run over its back leg. My friend said, "Leave it be. Let nature take its course." They knew there was no hope for the little kitten. But Brooke snapped at us all, telling us that we were cold and unfeeling. She lovingly cradled the kitten to her chest, hurriedly got on her bike and cycled all the way to the local vet, who said the kitten wasn't going to make it, and it was the kindest thing to put it down. Brooke refused to give up on the kitten, and begged the vet to help the kitten, saying that she'd pay him with all her pocket money. The vet treated the kitten and amputated its back leg, and against all the odds the kitten recovered and lived for 18 long years, and was very nimble on its 3 legs. Brooke adored the cat. She called it Grace, and from that moment on I decided I was in love with her. She had refused to give up on this kitten when everybody else had done so, even the vet. I decided privately to myself that one day, when I was all grown up and big, I was going to ask Brooke Bordeaux to be my wife. I wanted someone to fight for me faithfully, like Brooke had fought for that little kitten. Someone with a steely grit, who will stand up for you even if the ship is sinking, and it seems like all hope is lost. That's the kind of woman I wanted to marry, and Brooke fitted the picture perfectly. I had decided that tonight was the night I was going to ask her out. I couldn't afford to sit back on my laurels any more and do nothing to address my feelings. I had taken my father to one side the previous evening to ask him what I should do about Brooke Bordeaux. For the first time in my life I confided in him that I had been in love with Brooke since I was 8 years old. At this my father was more than a little stunned. "I've always been in love with her, Dad," I explained. "Mum was having a go at me yesterday afternoon, saying that I'm unable to commit to a woman. And she's right. I haven't been able to commit to anyone else, as ever since Brooke Bordeaux saved that dying little kitten in the middle of the road, when we were 8 years old. She never gave up on it, and I knew from that moment on she was the girl for me." "Good Lord, son, you're a slow mover. A snail might be faster than you are. You're telling me that you've been in love with this girl since you were 8 years old? I've never heard of anything like this before, but I guess there's a first time for everything." "Well, I've kept these feelings to myself, Dad. Love is not something you can rationalize or explain, is it?" "But I don't understand, son. Why you've never asked the girl out. For goodness sake, what is wrong with you? Frankly, I'm surprised someone hasn't snapped her up already. She's an attractive woman who's got a lot going for her. I understand she's an exceptional first-grade teacher, who the headmaster described as one of a kind. So what are you waiting for? Ask the girl out, for God's sake. From what I can see, you haven't had a problem dating other women like Olivia. So why are you so reticent to ask Brooke out? You've known her for long enough. Yes, she's a delightful young lady. But why haven't you done anything about showing her how you truly feel?" "I was afraid, Dad, to ask her out, like you were afraid to ask Mum out all those years ago. Remember, she was the one that approached you first, even though you had been besotted about her secretly for ages and ages. Mum believes if she hadn't taken the initiative to ask you out, nothing would have happened, and you might never have got married." "By Jove, you're right. I'd forgotten about that," said my father, rubbing his moustache reflectively. "I always fancied your mother, you know, but I could never pluck up the courage to ask her out. I was afraid she'd say no. So when she took the initiative to ask me out, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I'm sorry, son, it seems you've inherited my rather reticent genes, but you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone for once, if you want to make this lovely young lady part of your life. Between me and you, your mother's got ants in her pants. She's had them for the last few weeks or so, ever since you broke up with Olivia, for sure." "What has she got ants in her pants about, Dad?" "Well, she's stressing out, isn't she? She's been in quite a state for a while, as I was saying, worrying that you're going to be single forever. She wants you to settle down, find a lovely young lady for yourself, and have plenty of grandbabies for her to fuss over. You know how soppy your mother is." "Oh, that, she's already told me about that. She says I should have married Olivia, but that would have been dishonest, Dad. if I had feelings for someone else. Well, I wonder how well you're going to take it, son, if you watch Brooke Bordeaux walking down the aisle with another man on her arm, if you stand by and do nothing about your feelings. You need to address them, and you need to ask her out as soon as you possibly can. Get your act together, son. You're right, Dad. You remember Fern Redrose, don't you? Yes, I do. You hung around her and a few other local kids when you were a boy. What about her? Well, she's invited me to her 28th birthday party tonight, and Brooke will definitely be there. And come hell or high water, Dad, I'm going to ask her out. Good on you, son. I wish you the best. I'm sure that Brooke will be pleased to go out with you. Maybe she's been nursing a secret crush on you for all these years, but done nothing to address it. Stranger things have happened. I hope you're right, Dad. I really do. Well, you know what you need to do, son. When you get to that party, whatever the hell you do, don't you dare lose your nerve. You understand me? Don't leave that party without asking Brooke out, or you'll have me to deal with. I'm not going to let you blow this, son. I want the very best for you. And if you don't ask that girl out, I'll call her myself and ask her out on your behalf. And see if I don't. I won't lose my nerve, Dad. Not this time, I promise. When I arrived at Fern Redrose's farmhouse, the whole place was a bustling hive of activity, and Mrs. Redrose greeted me warmly, as did Fern, who threw her arms around me affectionately and welcomed me into her home. There was easily over 100 guests scattered liberally all over the Redrose extended property. My eyes skimmed the party, as if I was separating the cream from the milk. With my eyes, the cream on this occasion was most certainly Brooke Bordeaux. But where was she? For a moment my heart almost sank. I could see no sign or sight of her. Supposing she hadn't come to the party. I'd worked up myself into quite the frenzy, rehearsing the lines in my head of what I would say when I asked her out. And if she wasn't here tonight, that was going to be a setback for me for sure. It was then that I saw her. She looked utterly gorgeous. My whole body melted like butter on a corn cob. I could feel my heart thundering in my chest. My adrenaline spiked. Brooke was wearing a very flattering, fetching, streamlined, slinky black dress, with silvery glitter sprinkled all over the fabric. The dress hugged her in all the right places, and a slit on the side of her dress showed a tiny bit of leg, which was so much more provocative than if she'd been wearing something short and very revealing. I noticed her long dark hair had been prettily highlighted with auburn highlights that brought out the greenish haze colour of her eyes. She was not wearing much makeup, but in my opinion she looked like a goddess. I could see her nervously looking around at all the people at the party. She seemed somewhat on edge, as if she'd rather be anywhere else than at this party. I watched her helping herself to a simple glass of Coca-Cola, which looked pretty miserable and nondescript. She was having a few words with Fern, and then going over to the swing chair on the patio that overlooked the swimming pool, where the Redrose cat Arthur was lying in a neat little bundle, and she was affectionately stroking the cat and talking to him gently while sipping her Coca-Cola. This was typical behaviour for Brooke Bordeaux. She adored animals of every kind. I knew this was my moment to strike, so I wasted no time and walked over to Brooke with my heart in my throat, because that's how nervous I was. "Hello, Brooke," I said with a warm, friendly smile on my face. "I can't say I'm surprised you've gravitated towards this chair, given what's on it," I teased. "I know you love cats. And Arthur, well, he's very affectionate, isn't he? I can see he loves the way you're scratching him under his chin like that. Popcorn's the more skittish of Fern's cats, as you well know. You probably won't see him for dust tonight, but if anyone can win him over, it would be you, Brooke."
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Philip. You know me and cats. I can't help myself, can I? I can't believe I'm seeing you tonight. I'm so glad you came. You haven't changed very much. You look the same as I remembered you, only a little older, and wiser, I suspect.
Brooke's eyes lit up when she saw me. I didn't know whether they lit up because she was seeing a childhood friend of hers, or because she genuinely liked me in a romantic way, but I could only hope the latter might be the case. But one thing that was going for me was that she genuinely was delighted to see me.
It's quite a while since I saw you last, Philip. I've heard you've been doing very well for yourself. You have your own business, I believe, and an apartment, so you're definitely going places. I'm very impressed. But then again, I always knew you'd make something of yourself, and I wasn't wrong about that.
Well, yes, I do have my own apartment and a business, but I like being my own boss. The thought of having someone else telling me what to do doesn't float my boat exactly. I'm no good, you see, at being ordered around by people.
I think I understand where you're coming from on that. As a school teacher, we have to report to the headmaster all the time, and sometimes we do have our disagreements about things and how things should be done around the school. So I get why you like being in charge of your own business. Fern told me you were coming to the party tonight, and I was so pleased to hear that. It's rather like old times, everyone being together again, don't you think?
Well, I wouldn't have missed coming to this party, knowing you were here, I said rather boldly.
How sweet of you to say, Philip,
said Brooke, looking somewhat surprised by my compliment.
I can't believe that Fern is 28, can you? I mean, she's 2 years away from being 30, and I'm in the same boat, I'm afraid, and so are you, Philip. It feels like only the other day we were all riding around this area together with our bicycles, having the time of our lives. We had so much fun back in the day. But where did the time get to? It's like our childhoods blew out in a flash of lightning. They were far too short, don't you think?
That's life for you, I said. My grandfather's in his late 80s, you know. He says the very same thing. He says his body is more frail these days, but he feels as young and as bright and as vibrant as he was when he was 20 years old. And he also doesn't know where the time went to. He says it feels like only the other day that he was in his 20s.
Brooke sighed. You know what I think? Life is far too short. A human lifespan should be at least 800 years, maybe even 1,000, perhaps even 2,000. It was that way, you know, before the flood of Noah. I read about it in the Bible. If you look at how long some of those biblical characters lived, it's crazy.
Do you mind if I sit down next to you? I asked rather gingerly.
But of course,
said Brooke, shifting up onto the edge of the swing chair to give me some space between her and Arthur. Arthur remained on her lap, purring away very contentedly, as all animals seem to gravitate towards Brooke. She had a natural magic around them.
It's a fantastic party, don't you think? Said Brooke. Everyone appears to be having a great time, but I doubt I'll get into the swing of things. As I'm not drinking any alcohol tonight, I've got to watch myself in that regard.
Well, you're not missing out too much. And you're right, the party is fabulous, I said cheesily. But it's not as fabulous as you are, Brooke. You look great tonight. Very fetching in that dress you're wearing. It really becomes you.
I'm so glad you like it,
said Brooke, looking genuinely pleased by my gushing compliment. I was sure her cheeks were flushing bright pink. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was being so talkative, as over the years I had never had much to say to her, especially when I was in her company. But now you couldn't shut me up, as right now I was resolutely determined to win over this beautiful woman's heart. So finally, I'm glad to say, the stallion had broken out of his stable, and nothing was going to stop him with his endeavours.
Would you believe it, I was driving past this little boutique in town, about 5 weeks back, I think it was. I saw this fabulous dress on a mannequin in the window, the one I'm wearing now, of course. I decided I'd stop and try it on, just for a moment. But when I saw the price tag, I nearly fainted, because I knew I couldn't possibly afford to buy it. It cost an absolute fortune, you see. But I still decided to try it on. Silly me. And that was when I made a big mistake, because I could not leave without that dress. So yes, I did the unthinkable. I bought it, even though my mother thought I was being way too extravagant with my pitiful school teacher's salary. The truth is, I cannot afford to splash out on extravagances like this, so I really indulge myself. I mean, I still live with my parents, because I cannot afford to buy my own apartment like you. My mother was telling me that you don't go test driving a Rolls-Royce in a showroom if you can't afford to buy it. And in the same breath, for a dress, I shouldn't try it on if the price tag is too high. But you know what it's like? I just couldn't help myself. So yes, I was frivolously reckless. But we only live once, don't we?
Well, it's worth every penny that you spent on it, the dress I mean, because it looks fabulous on you.
Why, thank you, Philip. You really are showering me with compliments this evening. If you carry on this way, you're going to make me blush.
Do you remember that time, Brooke, when we discovered that half-dead kitten lying in the middle of the road? Someone had run over its back leg. We were all on our bicycles at the time, all 6 of us. The kitten looked to be dying. You were the one that insisted on taking it to the vet. Do you remember that? The cat lived another 18 years because of you, Brooke. You were horrified by the rest of us kids, giving up on the kitten so easily when you refused to do so.
Oh, I remember that very well. How could I forget? Even the vet thought the cat would die. He was giving up on her as well, and I couldn't believe it. But he decided to humour me. I think I went back home, you see, and I got the piggy bank. I had one of those piggy banks that you collect all the money in. And I think I had all pennies inside it. And I brought it to the vet's and just gave it to him. And I said that this was all the money I had saved up, and please would he operate on the kitten. He said I should keep my money and that he would operate on the kitten and amputate the back leg, but he couldn't guarantee anything. And he felt that the long-term prognosis was not good and that the little kitten would probably die. But it turned out that cat lived for 18 long years, and I adopted him as my own. That's why I called her Grace, because it was Grace that saved her, wasn't it?
This was the moment for me to tell Brooke how it was after that incident with the kitten that I had developed a huge secret crush on her. But that was when annoyingly Fern Redrose came rushing forward with a glass of punch in her hands, which she presented to Brooke. So the moment had been cruelly stolen.
You can't drink Coca-Cola all night, Brooke. That's being a party pooper, she teased. Have something a little bit more exotic, will you? This is the best punch you've ever tasted. It's got pineapple, passion fruit, coconut, and you name it in it. I made it myself, and it's amazing. It's very thoughtful of you, it really is, Fern, but you know me, I can't drink any alcohol,
said Brooke stiffly, waving her hand away.
You know, I told you, I don't want to drink alcohol any more. Don't worry about that, Brooke. I made this especially for you. It's non-alcoholic punch. There isn't any alcohol in it. But are you sure?
Asked Brooke doubtfully.
You made non-alcoholic punch especially for me? But of course I did. You're one of my best friends. I can't have you drinking Coke all evening, can I, Brooke?
Brooke took the punch and took a sip.
Oh, my goodness, it's delicious, she admitted. You can really taste the pineapple and passion fruit. I love it. You better be careful. I might drink the whole lot. That's the whole idea, said Fern.
Once Fern had left Brooke with her first glass of punch, we both sat for a long time on that swing chair with Arthur, talking about everything we could think of. But the opportunity to tell Brooke how I felt about her had been lost. It was after 3 glasses of punch that I realized that Brooke was becoming inebriated, so telling her about my feelings would likely be forgotten in the morning. The moment had been lost. I realized that Fern had deliberately been spiking Brooke's drinks, so I went off to have words with her. I was extremely annoyed with Fern's underhanded tactics, especially as Brooke had not wanted to consume any alcohol that evening. So what Fern had done was grossly unfair and very inappropriate. What the hell do you think you're doing, Fern? I know what's going on here, I'm not stupid. Brooke asked you specifically for no alcohol tonight, but you've been plying her with alcohol in that punch. Why would you do such a thing? She's giggling madly and is extremely inebriated. Arthur, your cat, was happily sitting on her lap a while ago, but even he is freaked out by her, because she's got all giggly. She's now looking for your other cat, Popcorn, but she can barely stand up straight. Her eyes have gone all glassy. She's very disorientated and confused. Fern flushed with embarrassment. It's just you know what she's like. She's so uptight all the time, so uncomfortable. Just look what she was like when she first arrived at the party. I didn't want her to be like this all evening.
I wanted her to let go of her inhibitions, to have a great time. And when Brooke has a little to drink, she does relax. And over the last year or so, she's been so tense and uptight. I thought sneaking a bit of alcohol into her punch wouldn't do her any harm at all.
I don't know what you thought you were doing, Fern. You don't do something like this to your best friend. If Brooke didn't want to drink, you should have respected that. How much alcohol did you give her exactly? Because she's slurring her words, and she's not in a good way.
Oh, I guess I overdid it,
Fern admitted.
I just wanted my best friend to have fun, that's all. Whereabouts is she?
We could see Brooke tumbling into the house, calling out Popcorn's name. She bent under tables and looked in the corners of the rooms for Popcorn, and her pursuit of the cat seemed relentless. The Red Roses had 2 cats, Popcorn and Arthur, both that I knew very well. Popcorn was under the dining room table, that was spread out with delicious array of food. The oversized, very porky cat was possibly hanging around in the hope that he might get some titbits from very kind people. Brooke got onto her hands and knees and started proposing to the cat, as she talked to him under the table. I knew she was so drunk, and I remember Mrs. Redrose looking extremely annoyed by this. She took her daughter very discreetly to one side, and asked her why Brooke was legless. Even though it was Fern's party, it would seem she was in the doghouse with her mother, because her mother knew exactly what she was up to. I could hear her mother scolding Fern for spiking Brooke's drink.
What the hell were you thinking? Exactly how much alcohol did you give her? Just look at her.
I can't believe you've done this, Fern.
It's just a bit of alcohol, Mum,
said Fern defensively. But her mother wasn't buying it. I mean, by the looks of Brooke, she had drunk a ton of the stuff. I stayed by her side all evening, while she was engaged in this drunken stupor. That was not her fault. At one point she started stroking the couch, and telling it to be a good girl, and many people found this rather amusing. I did not. I spoke to Mrs. Redrose when Brooke began to fall asleep on the swing chair. Even in her drunken state I found her to be extremely beautiful. Mrs. Redrose told me that Brooke would stay overnight at their house, as she was so wasted, and it seemed like a great idea to me. I agreed to carry her to the spare bedroom, with Mrs. Redrose at my side, and together we tucked her into bed in all her clothes. We didn't even bother to remove her shoes. I would have driven her home myself, had I come to the party by car, but I'd walked here because I knew I was going to drink. Little did I know that my walk home that night would be quite an eventful experience, that I would be unlikely to ever forget. I had not drunk much that evening. Instead, I had spent most of the evening by Brooke's side. Finally, Fern did take me to one side and have it out with me.
I know you've always had a crush on Brooke. Don't deny it, Philip. I know it. And tonight it was even more clear than usual. You really like her, don't you?
Is it that obvious?
Of course it's obvious. If you want a word of advice, Philip, tell Brooke how you feel about her when she's sober. I know she likes you. She always has.
She told you that?
Some things you don't have to be told. Some things you just know,
Fern told me.
So yes, she does like you.
When I left the Red Rose party, there was definitely a skip in my step. Fern believed that Brooke had always liked me, and that was music to my ears. I decided I would give Brooke a day or so to sober up after the party, and then I would pop around to her house and invite her out on our first date. I figured texting her would be a bit on the lame side. I was listening to music on my Bluetooth earphones as I walked down the country lanes that were fringed by tall, lofty trees on every side, for this was a rural area swaddled by woods, and most of the properties were pretty rustic. It was a tenebrific night. The moonlight was not desperately obliging. It appeared to be obscured by some cloud cover. I had regularly taken energetic walks in this part of the world before, at the dead of night, and it had never bothered me in the past. I wasn't feeling remotely apprehensive about walking back to my parents' house at this time of night. The walk was both invigorating, and the music I was listening to was enjoyable. I possibly shouldn't have been walking in the middle of this sequestered country road like this, but I didn't believe for a second that anybody else would be out at this late hour, nor would anybody be driving down the road at this time. So imagine my shock when I was just knocked over. I felt a sharp pain in the front of my left leg. My body appeared to collapse in the middle of the road. Everything happened fast at the speed of light. I looked down on myself and discovered I was covered in blood. And that was when I realized I must have been hit by a car. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Seeing myself covered in blood was absolutely terrifying. My leg was throbbing, and I suddenly felt incredibly weak, which may have been brought on by the shock. I guess an artery on my leg was splitting open, and had been severed in some way, and was beginning to bleed out. I knew if I didn't stop the bleeding, I was pretty much dead. So I began holding my hand tightly over the open wound to stop the blood from gushing out. All of a sudden I saw an obscure figure getting out of a car and staggering towards me with an ungainly stride. I realized it was Brooke. She was drunk and swaying like a tree, but when she bent down to see me lying on the road covered in blood, she took one look at me, and her eyes widened with terror. When she saw me, she said, "Philip! Oh my God! Oh my God, what have I done?" She made this very unfortunate gagging sound, and I heard her rushing off to a nearby bush and violently throwing up the contents of her stomach. I guess seeing me lying in the middle of the road covered in blood, and realizing that she was responsible for running me over, was making her hurl. Time stood still. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, almost losing awareness of my surroundings. I do remember lying in the middle of the road, my clothes spattered in blood, my heart pounding, my hand desperately trying to stop the blood flow. Everything was so dreamlike, so very surreal. And that was when the Bigfoot appeared. There were two of them. I thought I was imagining things at first. I was losing so much blood. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. The male Bigfoot appeared enormous. He ripped off the shirt from my back, and that I felt because I could feel the cold air on my body. He tore it into shreds and wound bandages around my leg to stop the bleeding. He knew instinctively what he was doing, and he was efficient. I realized these Bigfoots were trying to save my life. They were chatting together. The male's voice boomed rather loudly. The female's voice was soothing and comforting. They were talking to each other backwards and forwards, and once they had covered my leg in the bandages, the male Bigfoot looked straight into my eyes, and then everything went completely black. Looking back, I think he might have hypnotized me in some way, as after looking into those dark eyes of his, it was like the lights went out for me. I do not remember anything after that, apart from drifting between consciousness and unconsciousness. Instinctively, I was well aware that I was being looked after. I could sense I was lying on something very soft and downy. It felt like a comfortable mattress made out of grass and feathers, and it smelt incredibly woodsy. I recall the accident in flashbacks. I remembered Brooke's car being involved, and that she'd knocked me over onto the road. I felt woozy, as if caught under an anaesthetic that I couldn't break through, because it was all but a foggy blur to me. It was as if I was held to ransom, under a grogginess that I simply could not overcome, try as I might. I could feel someone gently patting my face, with what felt like a damp cloth. They were talking to me soothingly in a gentle chatter, as if trying to offer me comfort. The cloth appeared to be dabbing me on my body, especially on the leg area, where the skin had been broken open, so the application caused my skin to sting. The large hand patted me gently, as if to calm me down and reassure me. Someone would lift me up into a seated position and throw something really bitter down my throat that made me want to gag. It was so disgusting. But there were other times that I was given something that tasted rather of honey on my mouth, and it melted down the back of my throat and was very soothing. I was to learn later that I spent several days with these Bigfoots in what appeared to be a cave of some kind. As to where it was, I cannot tell you, and my time spent with them is all but an ambiguous blur.
I suspect it's meant to be that way, almost as if I'm not supposed to remember what exactly happened. While I was convalescing in the cave, it was comforting to feel that I was not alone. I felt extremely safe in the presence of these Bigfoots, for I knew they meant me no harm. I would hear them talking together, along with the crackling sound of a fire, and I could smell the wood smoke, and all that was reassuring. I remember one day just waking up feeling so much better and a lot stronger, and I sat up on this large bed made of grass, feathers and leaves, and in truth it was more comfortable than my expensive king-size bed at home, with its plush mattress. I could see I was in a large cave, and that was when I realized where I was. It had been made into a cozy den that was covered with animal skins. There were tree stumps around the caves that were being used for sitting, and I noticed some woven grass baskets. I looked up to see a male and female Bigfoot standing side by side, looking at me tenderly. The first thing I observed was that although they were so intimidating, in both size and stature, that their eyes were incredibly kind. The Bigfoots never said anything to me at all, but they did look at me and communicate with me telepathically. The female Bigfoot said to me, "You are better now. We'll take you back to where we found you on that road. You very nearly died, but it wasn't your time to go, so we had to intervene. We had to stop the bleeding in your leg, or you would have bled out. But your leg is much better now. It's healed over, and you will live." The male Bigfoot then said to me, "I need you to look into my eyes. I need to put you in a trance, so that you won't remember your time spent with us. Please look directly into my eyes." I did just that, and then all I remember is that everything suddenly went black. And then when I came to, I realized I was on the same road where I'd had the accidents. I discovered to my surprise that I was wearing no shirt and no pants, just a pair of boxer shorts. The Bigfoots must have disposed of my blood-soaked clothes, but luckily it wasn't cold. I discovered I still had the bandages the Bigfoots had made on my leg, and I inspected them, and the Bigfoots were right. The wound had healed over and had closed. I could see some kind of green ointment had been applied to the gash. I wouldn't even need stitches. I do believe the Bigfoot stopped me from bleeding out. I learnt that I'd been away for 3 days, but I doubt anyone would have registered I was missing, not even my parents. I had my own apartment, you see, and I worked for myself, so the alarm would never have been raised that I'd been missing, unless Brooke Bordeaux had told anyone that she had run into me while driving the car. Indeed, if she had witnessed the Bigfoots whisking me away from the scene of the accident, she'd probably have believed it was the effects of the drink talking that had teased her imagination, and not realized that what she'd witnessed had indeed been real. I knew by the time I reached my parents' home, I'd get something to eat straight away, have a shower, and get dressed, and then I'd go and see Brooke Bordeaux at once. My close call with death meant telling her how I felt about her. Simply could not wait a moment longer. I didn't blame her for running me over that night. None of this was her fault. It was all down to Fern Redrose. She was the one that plied Brooke with alcohol. Brooke's account. After Fern Redrose's party, my mother and father were none too pleased with me. I guess I can't blame them for that. My mother continued to harp on about what a drunken mess I was when I arrived home that night. She was paranoid at the best of times, but my driving home drunk, something that she found impossible to forgive. What I didn't share with my mother, of course, was about the haunting nightmare that kept harassing me, and it was all about Philip Joubert. I do recall him in the early part of the evening at Fern Redrose's party, coming over to talk to me. That had been a pleasant surprise for me, as over the course of my childhood, I'd secretly taken quite a shine to Philip Joubert, and I really, really liked him. He was the handsome boy that never really said very much, but that evening he'd been surprisingly talkative. He'd sat next to me on the swing chair overlooking the swimming pool, telling me how fabulous I looked. I'd never known him to be so complimentary. Later, the evening becomes a blur to me. I'm ashamed to say that I do not recall my drive home that night,
from Fern Redrose's party. But I kept having a nightmare where I'd knocked Philip Joubert down in my car. I'd actually killed him, and he was covered in blood. And then there were a couple of Bigfoots on the scene that stood by his side, and the male Bigfoot had thrown him over his shoulder and just literally glided away. I refused to entertain this nightmare because it was so graphic and the visions horrific. I reminded myself that the gypsy I'd met at the fair had told me that I must be very careful, as I'd have an accident on the road and potentially kill someone. The image of Philip Joubert lying on the road flashed into my head again and again, and it was so bad that I was beginning to wonder if it could potentially be true. 3 days had gone by, and I knew I had to go and see if Philip Joubert was all right, to satisfy myself that none of this had actually happened. Imagine my surprise when he rocked up at my front doorstep and invited me out for a drink. It was over drinks that he told me what had happened that night. I knew his story about the Bigfoots was true, because that was the nightmare that had been haunting me. And they had obviously intervened to help him. And as a result, Philip was alive. And I was the one that could potentially have killed him had the Bigfoots not intervened. So the gypsy's prognostications had been absolutely right. It was over drinks that Philip Joubert confessed to me that he had always had a crush on me and been in love with me since I was 8 years old. I admitted I felt exactly the same way about him. So 3 days later, he got down on his knees and proposed to me, and I said yes. That was 7 years ago. We are now happily married with 2 little girls. So Philip's mother's dream of being a grandmother one day was fulfilled. But every day I'm reminded that this life I am having now was given to me by 2 Bigfoots, because if it weren't for their intervention, Philip wouldn't be here. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.